Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland, and tonight we have one of our favorite returning guests. Jamie asked me how many times he's been on the show. I don't even remember now. It's been so many times, but he's worth it every time. Is Paul Anthony Wallis. If you haven't been watching the show, you don't know who Paul Anthony Wallis is, but if you have, I think you probably caught an episode with him. He's like the George Norrie described him as the Eric Von Daniken of our time, and I completely agree with George Norrie on that one. Completely, because I've loved every one of his books. Escaping from Eden, Echoes of Eden, Scars of Eden, and now his new one just came out, I think, last week. I got a digital copy I've been trying to read. Haven't had a lot of time. I'm actually feeling a little under the weather tonight. You know, my back's been real bad, still not much better, and a bit nauseous tonight, and I don't know why. But I was no way going to cancel on this show because I love Paul as a guest. He's one of my favorite guests because it's all about Paleo contact or ancient aliens or whatever you want to refer to it. That, you know, basically a lot of the stuff in our ancient lore, culture, religions, the Bible is alien contact that we mistook for gods. And Paul's a man that gets really deep into the words and the translations and the history. I love talking to Paul, and we will open up the phone lines later tonight for you to call in and ask your questions of Paul. You should have plenty, because this guy has a lot of information. Every single book doesn't disappoint. This one I've been reading, The Eden Conspiracy, is not disappointing. I think this is going to be one of his best books. I'm not finished with it, but I pretty much think this is going to be one of his best books. I'm totally into it. And, of course, we got a lot of weird to get to in the World Wide Web of Weird tonight as well, so we'll do that. A lot to get to, as I said. So let's go ahead and get rolling into the show. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight's guest, Paul Anthony Wallis, will be joining us after the World Wide Web of Weird, after our first commercial break. Joining me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Jamie D. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing good, thank you. And I'm really wanting to check out this book. It sounds super interesting.
Yeah, all of his books have been good. I have not been disappointed by one. And I'm not saying that because he's a friend. I mean, honestly, if you're like me, I read Eric Von Daniken. When he's compared to that, I get it, because I read Chariots of God when I was 10 or 11 years old. And it totally got me into the idea of paleo contact. And Paul takes you way deep into that rabbit hole. Joining me, as always, from St. Augustine, Florida, is Rob Autry himself. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Doing good.
Glad to have you here. We missed you some of the Sundays when you had a lot of gigs, so I'm glad to have you here tonight, especially to roll the videos. There's one video I wanted to play tonight, and last minute I had to change. I can't play the video, but I will direct you where to see this video of an office worker. That's later in the newscast, but sometimes I got to be careful which videos I play because they're owned by like big networks, and they will totally tag the video if we do. So I caught it. I'm like, nope, can't play that video. But we got a lot of the good weird stuff tonight, so let's go ahead and roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, I have a video of something we reported on, about a few months ago, about the footage where we had a photo of it at the time. Remember the silver spherical ball over, I believe it was Iran? That's one of our drones or something caught on camera. It was leaked from the DoD. But we haven't seen the video. Well, our congressional hearings we had this last week, they actually played the video of it. And I gotta say, it is pretty incredible. For those listening on the Paranormal Soup radio network on the Talkstream Live Paranormal Radio app, we are a webcast. We do stream out live to YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. You can listen, and I'll narrate as best as possible. We do have some good stuff you might want to come check out on the live stream. So let me go ahead and get this up here. All right, so this is, if you remember, we had, I think it was over Iran. We showed the photo of this at least a few months ago. Director of the Pentagon UFO Research Group provided an update on their work at a briefing for the Senate Committee on Armed Services and indicated they have yet to find any evidence that the phenomenon is extraterrestrial in nature. During Wednesday's morning's meeting, which can be seen in which we're going to have here, just some of the video from it, Sean Kirkpatrick, who heads the All-Domain Anomaly Research Office, acknowledged that the challenge of trying to solve the riddle of unidentified aerial phenomena, musing that we cannot answer decades questions about UAPs all at once, but we must begin somewhere. To that end, he noted that they are currently examining over 650 reports that the group has received over the last few years. Kirkpatrick went on to stress that to date, only a very small percentage of the hundreds of UAP reports display signatures that could reasonably be described as anomalous. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Listen, I listened to the hearings, and what he does, he shows this video we're about to play, and then he shows another video I'm not going to get into, but it's an actual aircraft, but when you see it in like an infrared thing or whatever, it looks weird. But he shows, you can see that it's got heat signatures, and it's, he explains that we can tell what this is. But this video, no, we don't know what this is. So go ahead and play this. It's going to be hard to see here. You can go to Coast to Coast AM has his article with a link to the video. But you got to really go 20, 30 minutes in before he shows this. It's a small spherical craft there. I think I can do a zoom in of it.
This is
you can see it.
All of the data we have associated with this.
This thing's flying fast, man.
It is going to be virtually impossible.
I think the picture he showed, it's like right up on the camera the way they did it, but I think it was a zoom in. Had you guys seen the video yet until now?
No, I hadn't seen the video.
I don't know if you remember the picture of it I had. Yeah.
I saw another one just the other day where and I was bringing it up yesterday. It's strange that there's a lot of these right now.
Mm-hmm.
Same exact looking, moving the same speed.
You know what I always, when I think of when I see something like that, is the case in Florida from the 70s. Is the I can't think of the family's name at the moment because I'm not feeling well. They had the ball that crashed, the silver ball that crashed in their property. And it started the fire, and then the family said it would follow them around. It was weird, and then suddenly they don't want to ever talk about it again, and nobody knows what happened to it.
The Betts family sphere.
Betts family sphere. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, that I feel like is always related to some of these things we see like this. Was that thing that crashed in your yard one of these that was like a drone that malfunctioned?
Yeah.
Or it's like some kind of drone is what I pictured it as.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. And now that we're in the times we're in, I wonder, could this be something because there are so many people showing the same type of thing, if it could be a military something.
If it's military something, what's the propulsion? How do they make it fly? I have no knowledge, and of course I'm not privy to the DoD's secret department defense programs, but I highly doubt they have any technology that does that. You can't see any visible propulsion. It's something that small that move that fast. A drone, yes, but drones have. I mean, Rob, you know about drones.
Yeah, it's not any kind of typical drone that I've ever seen.
No, this is something I think has been around a long time. I mean, think about the pictures of some of the ancient drawings of discs and suns, and it could be they seeing these balls up in the sky. I don't know. I mean, the disc, of course, is the typical UFO shape, but. Yeah. All right, this next one.
Don't exist. I'm just saying it's weird that recently there's so many of these.
UFO Sightings Daily is a great YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Subscribe. This guy has great UFO videos. This one he actually caught on a live feed from the International Space Station. And I think this is pretty interesting. A peculiar piece of footage circulating online shows a odd glowing orb mysteriously floating past the International Space Station. The unusual scene was spotted the past Saturday by the UFO researcher Scott Waring as he was watching a live stream from a camera aboard the International Space Station. To his astonishment, the darkness of space was suddenly pierced by a strange yellow sphere that appeared outside the station and slowly floats past the view of the camera. Go ahead and play this. This is UFO Sightings Daily. And, this guy gets videos he posts and shows a lot and does analysis, but this is one he caught on his own just watching the International Space Station. I don't know why it's not playing. It's like blank. That's weird. Maybe close it out and reload it. It shows it right there, like it's going to play. And then it just goes blank. Maybe fast forward through it. See what happens. Here, it sees it in the screen. Hit play. Just hit play for a second. It's just not wanting to play it.
It's not playing.
It's an interesting video. I wish you could show this one. I planned to, but UFO Sightings Daily has it. You go see it, and you can see the International Space Station. This is just like a big, it's bright, glowing orb. It's bright. I don't know what that could be. I don't think it's just a reflection from the sun, this way this is showing up on the camera. It's self-illuminating. I don't think it's just a reflection. It's something pretty intensely glow. I don't know. Now is it going to play? Nope.
No, I just reloaded the whole page.
Huh. Oh, well. People can go check it out. UFO Sightings Daily. It's a big YouTube channel on UFO Sightings. He's got good stuff compared to a lot of the other crap I see out there. All right, so this has definitely been seen. A lot of people talk about this. Todd, our resident a-hole. Hi, Todd. Was like, have you seen this one? I'm like, yes, we're covering this one tonight. Cattle mutilations. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on with cattle mutilations, but this is pretty gruesome. So pre-warn. Because I know pictures. I don't do the pictures of cattle mutilations on here anymore. Authorities investigating cattle mutilations case in Texas soon realized that they have a much larger mystery on their hands. When they subsequently received 5 more reports of similar suspicious slayings, the stunning series of animals' deaths came to light on Wednesday when the Madison County Sheriff's Office took to social media to alert residents to the odd situation. They explained that it began when a rancher found one of their cows lying dead on the ground, and upon closer inspection, discovered that the animal's tongue had been removed and it had sustained cuts around its mouth that were described as being done with apparent precision. However, this was just the start of the weirdness unfolding in the Madison County. The sheriff's office went on to detail how there was no blood spilled at the crime scene, no sign that the animal struggled, no tracks of any kind around the site, and eerily, no predators or birds would scavenge the remains of the cows, leaving it to decay untouched for several weeks. The rather classic cattle mutilation case has now turned into something of a flap, as they revealed while looking into the Longhorn Cross death, 5 other similar occurrences involving 4 adult cows and 1 yearling were reported. These cases are unnerving, similar to the initial incident, as all the animals sustained cuts around their mouths and their tongues removed with surgical precision. Each incident occurred in different locations, pastures, and herds, they said, while nothing that just like the first, there was no sign of struggle or disturbance in the grass, no blood spill, and no noticeable tracks. And the remains did not attract any scavengers, indicating as of now that the 6 cases are unsolved. The sheriff's office also outright suggested that they are connected to an infamous cattle mutilation phenomenon, observing that multiple similar incidents have been reported across the United States. We are actively coordinating with other agencies to find the answers. Given the history of the mystery, one suspects that the I cannot talk. The perpetrators will ultimately manage to evade justice yet again, as they have somehow done for decades. I mean, the sheriff's office is bluntly saying it like, hey, guys, this has been going on for a long time, and have you heard of one of us ever solving this? No. So,
it's crazy.
At least they're being honest, like, they're saying.
What's weird is there's no scavengers or anything on it.
That's what is typical. in a real cattle mutilation case.
I mean, if it was
Can't
a
find
person,
tracks.
yeah, person that would have done it, for one, they wouldn't have been that clean. For two, unless they douse it in gas or something,
No. I mean, it's not only that. They don't leave any tracks. There's nobody.
Yeah.
If somebody's like walking up barefoot, maybe they're barely leaving a track. Maybe they're, and they're going to leave no real blood spill and no struggle with the animal as it cuts out its tongue or how they kill it.
Yeah.
It's been going on for Linda Moulton-Howe. That's one of the top researchers in this field. Has been covering this how long? Has she got any other answers? Not to her fault. Trust me, she's a serious woman that's tried to get down to this, and nobody knows. Is it the military? Is it aliens? What would aliens want with cow tongues and anus cores from cows? I'm not trying to be gross here. What would they want with it? What are they using it for? What do they need it for?
That might be scarier than the question.
Yes, and if it's on militaries, that's more scary. What are we doing with it? Why do we need to do that? Can't the military get their own secret cattle farm and core all the anuses and cut out all the tongues they want to do instead of just raiding ranches' farms? That's never made sense to me. This is, to me, it bothers the hell out of me because my mind just goes a million places what it could be they're using it for. Or are they us from the future? And we have eaten so much damn cattle and beef that we have to come back in time because they went extinct, and we gotta we really into the anus core now. And
what do you want to do? Hey, come on, let's
I don't know.
I
don't know.
Wow.
All right, where are we at here? Okay, this is the one I couldn't show you the video of. So this one's just gonna be a picture from the video. Coast to Coast AM has this. This is the original article. I'll describe what I saw in the video, which is pretty interesting. It's not super crazy or anything happens, but it's this guy's reaction in the video. You can go to Coast to Coast, find this article, click on the link to the video. It's owned by NBC, so I couldn't play it. This guy's reactions to me seems very honest. This is a guy, if it's not real paranormal phenomena, is being pranked. The reaction seems honest. Just the body language. I'm a big body language guy. So you don't hear any audio. It's a security camera in the office. A security camera overlooking an office in Columbia captured the moment when a frightened man fled the room after objects seemingly began to move on their own. The eerie incident occurred last week as David Pineda was working alone late night at his job in the city of Medellin. Whatever sense of solitude he may have been feeling at the time was undoubtedly shattered when a coffee mug that was sitting on his desk suddenly fell to the floor. While cleaning up the mess from the inexplicable spill, Pineda stopped in his tracks when a nearby chair began to move on its own. Sharing the security footage on social media, the young man pointed out the possibility of paranormal activity and marveled that I had tried to find a logical explanation, but after watching the video, I got the chills again, laminating that I don't want to work alone so late anymore. Pineda went on to explain that the building is almost a century old and has many stories, but I didn't want to know them like this. Looking back on the experience, he indicated that his first thought was that the mug had simply fallen because he had put it very close to the edge. And you watch the video, no, that ain't it. Something pushes it. He didn't put it that close to the edge. Something definitely pushes it off the edge. It's either this is hijinks or a joke or he's making it up. But like I said, his reaction to it, you watch his body language is... He stops. You can see he's frozen. Did I just see what I saw? And he's getting up, he's texting somebody about what's just going on, and he goes to pull out a chair, and the chair, something just goes whoop, pushes the chair, it's fast, pushes the chair back in, and he jumps back, and he's typing to somebody, and he's oh, screw this, and he's gone. And he's I'm clocking out, I'm done. Imagine you work in a place, you got to do the late nights there, and it's got this kind of stuff going on. Probably a little hard to focus.
Probably.
Oh, man, see, we're already running out of time, damn it. All right, let's move on. This one's I don't know, is this a Florida woman? I don't think so. Woman accused of murdering husband. Sorry, Florida. I didn't mean to hit on you there. Claims to channel his spirit at trial. Yes, a murder trial. No, this is Malaysia. This is a Malaysia woman. Murder trial in Malaysia took a bizarre turn when a woman accused of killing her husband claimed to channel the man's spirit and in his voice asserted that she is innocent. The very weird courtroom drama reportedly unfolded on Wednesday in the city of Seremban, if I'm saying that right, at a pretrial hearing who the accused of stabbing Posing Hayap to death in January of 2022. At the start of the proceeding, the woman issued an impromptu address to the court wherein she insisted upon her innocence. Although the judge advised her that the trial had not actually even started yet, Yan had more to say as she then produced a proverbial star witness in the form of her late husband, whose spirit she claimed to be channeling. Posing Hayap is speaking. You have to understand that my wife did not kill me, Yan declared before the astounded court. Why don't you listen to me? I was fated to die. As one might imagine, the judge was unmoved by the supernatural testimony and simply set a date for the murder trial, while also ordering the defendant to undergo psychiatric evaluation in the interim. That might be what she's getting at. The son of Sam did that. He says, like, I was talking to my neighbor's dog. He told me to kill these people. And later on, FBI profile basically got admitted that it was all BS.
And didn't
It was just
OJ
trying to
say
get an
Charlie
insanity
told
play.
him?
Huh?
Didn't OJ say Charlie told him to go kill Denise?
Wait, is that in his book where he says, if I might have done it book or something like
No,
that?
it was a documentary. He has, I think he's a schizo. He has a whole Charlie in his
Oh,
head.
yeah. I mean, totally.
And
Yeah.
Charlie told him to go look in the window and everything.
It sounds familiar, like I've heard this before, something like that. Yeah, okay. Well, that wouldn't surprise me.
Charlie bit my finger.
He sold his soul to Star and Naked Gun. I don't know. Okay, let's move on. Shoot. Where are we at? I love this. 5th grade class. I can't get too deep in this because we're running out of time. 5th grade class successfully lobbies for Sasquatch protection in Washington State. For the second year in a row, a county in Washington State has declared itself a refuge for Sasquatch after being lobbied by a class of 5th graders. The brainchild of the teacher Andrea Andrews of the Lincoln Elementary School in the city of Holoquim. The unique civics lesson saw her students research the famed cryptid and then pen a letter to a local government body in which they argue that the creature needs to be recognized and protected. In 2022, her class convinced the Gray Harbors County Board of Commissions to unanimously pass a resolution where the county was declared to be just such a Sasquatch refuge area. Based on that success, Andrews brought the lesson back this year in the hopes of extending their efforts. I think that's pretty awesome. I would love to interview this teacher. The 2023 installment of the project reportedly accumulated earlier this month at a meeting of the Calm County Commission, wherein the Andrews class appeared before the board via Zoom and made the case for Bigfoot. You know what I want to say about this is kids can get this. There's grown adults that have gone to their state legislatures to pass this kind of stuff, and they've laughed them out or not done anything. But all you got to do is get some 5th grader kids up there and say, "You don't want to protect Bigfoot." What?
Is that a high sighting area, or why would they in that spot be talking about that?
Well, I think that Washington State, yes.
Oh, yeah, Washington State.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So maybe we need to hear in Indiana. Last week I had the story of our local town of somebody, wrecking their car after they saw a Bigfoot. I mean, I hope nobody ever does kill Bigfoot to prove Bigfoot. I don't think that's going to ever happen. I from the sounds of descriptions of people's encounters, there's something so much about the encounter. There's no way anybody's going to actually pull the trigger unless they really felt threatened by one of these things, which there have been some cases. And some people fired shots and these things have just disappeared. So, are they supernatural? Yeah. Question for another night because we got to get moving on. All right. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Oh, you remember how I've been talking about the last few weeks? Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak made this. Let's hold back on AI research for 6 months, have a moratorium on it because it's getting too far. It's a danger. I'm like, wow, way to go, Elon, Steve. And then I see this article. Elon Musk is setting up a new artificial intelligence company. Wait, I thought
He's been doing this where he says
you were supposed to destroy this, not join.
This is the third time he's done that.
I know. This is why I tell people, don't trust these people. Despite having recently signed an open letter calling for a 6-month halt on the advancement of artificial intelligence to give experts a chance to investigate or maybe him to catch up. The potential dangers of technology, Elon Musk is reportedly starting up his own AI company called XAI. According to a report, the Wall Street Journal, the new company was incorporated in Nevada last month with Musk as the sole director and 100 million shares being authorized for sale. This has been some buzz for a while, but Musk is going ahead with the artificial intelligence startup, and he's reportedly assembled quite a formidable team of engineers and researchers to take on the task of creating a system that could rival ChatGPT. A bunch of people are investing in it. It's real, and they're excited about it. And they're told the Financial Times. It's also believed that Musk has purchased 10,000 graphics processing units to help handle the complicated workload of the new artificial intelligence that he plans to build. The move has been rumored to be part of Musk's ambition to create an app that can do almost anything, a concept he has tentatively referred to as X. It will certainly be interesting to see what he comes up with. What happened to the moratorium? What happened? Seriously, like you say, you make this whole ethical case that we got to slow this down. We don't know the impacts. That takes 6 months. No, you're same time investing, and when you were making this announcement, you had already had this in the works.
He did the same thing for fossil fuels, fighting for fossil fuels, and he's just turned around and recanted all that within a few days too.
Yeah, the guy's all over the place, like the alien thing too. That's
He's
it for the worldwide. That's it for the World Wide Web of Weird tonight. Our guest is Paul Anthony Wallis. We're going to be talking about his newest book. It just came out, and I think it's going to be one of his best ones. Is the Eden Conspiracy. If you're into paleo contact, ancient aliens kind of stuff. Eric Von Daniken, Graham Hancock, Ancient Apocalypse, great show on Netflix. You're in that kind of stuff, and you haven't seen Paul Wallis on my show before, you're in for a treat. Because this is a really great guest. I'm not feeling so great tonight, but there's no way I was going to miss this guest tonight. Paul Anthony Wallis, we're going to talk about the Eden Conspiracy when we're back from the short commercial break.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The international chart-topping, haunted horror of Haverfordwest has been described as terrifyingly real, a must-read, shocking and chilling brilliance, genuinely worrying, utterly frightening. Don't read before bed. Described as one of the spookiest writers out there, best-selling author G.L. Davies presents Haunted, Horror of Haverfordwest, the true paranormal account that is shocking the world. Dare you enter? Dare you read? Haunted, Horror of Haverfordwest is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Pray you never have to live there.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS range ring.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe. 5 by 5.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Paul Anthony Wallis. Paul is an internationally best-selling author whose books probe the world of ancestral narratives for their insight into the human origins of human potential and our place in the cosmos. As a senior churchman, Paul served for 33 years as a church doctor, a theological educator, and an archdeacon in the Anglican Church in Australia. He has published numerous titles of Christian mysticism and spirituality and is a popular speaker at conferences around the world. Paul is known for his best-selling series of titles of Paleo Contact. George Norrie hailed Paul's 2020 book, Escaping from Eden, as the generation's Chariots of the Gods, propelling Paul onto the international stage as the go-to guy in the field of Paleo Contact. In 2021, the sequel, Scars of Eden, was endorsed by the legendary Eric von Daniken, followed in 2022 by Echoes of Eden, and 2023 by The Eden Conspiracy, both endorsed by George Norrie. Paul's interviews and documentaries are on the Paul Wallis channel, The Fifth Kind, and El Quintino Tipo are watched by millions worldwide. We've had Paul on several times the show. I've been reading this book, his newest one. I've read all of them. This is the newest one, The Eden Conspiracy. And this, I think, is going to be his best one. It really is getting, I can feel it, it's getting into kind of the hidden powers that have controlled us for thousands of years, have changed the narrative and the story of what we've been told about our religions. Especially, and I've talked about it before, I really loved some of it when he got into Yahweh. I'm in the ancient name of God. And if you're offended by our religious talks, I apologize. I'm not trying to offend anybody or the religious beliefs, but I'm looking for the deep meaning of what the real story is. What does archaeology and the original translations of these things mean? And Paul gets to that. And that's why he's one of my favorite guests tonight. We will open up the phone lines later in the show for you to call in and join this conversation. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. Welcome back to the show, Paul.
Good day, Jason. It's a pleasure to be with you once again. I'm sorry you're feeling a little under the weather. You were the last time we spoke. I hope it's nothing to do with me.
Oh,
but
really? That sounds awful.
I always enjoy our conversations, and good day,
Oh.
Jamie and Rob as well.
Yeah, tonight is weird. Like, I've had the back issue for almost a month now, and then like an hour and a half ago, I just started getting like nausea. And I'm like, what is this? I got a dinner that didn't sell so well, I think, or something. I don't know. I'm like, come on, man. I got a great guest tonight. I've been totally loving the book so far. I haven't finished it yet, about 100 pages in, but I'm loving. I think it's gonna be one of your best books. And like I said, you really start out. You start out in Brazil in the book, but you know about how cultures, and we talked about this last time on your show, are erased or changed. Their histories are changed, and the narrative is changed. That power of the narrative, and
Yes.
and how how our history has been shaped by this.
Well, 100 pages in, you're just getting to the juicy part, talking about how that happens. And in the Eden Conspiracy, I really do go into some detail as to how the narrative has been shifted in the past, who was responsible, when they did it, what the opportunity was, what the effect was. And I give the example of the change in the biblical tradition. What changed it from being a canon of memory of ancient ET contact to being a book about God? What changed it from being memories of contact to being a religion of worship and obedience? And who made those changes, and how far reaching were those changes? So I really put names on it, dates, nuts and bolts, and I think it's going to be hard for people to read this and come away without an appreciation that there are always powers seeking to control the narrative. And if I can map out how it was done this one time, it's easier to recognize when you see it being done on other occasions.
Like now, like currently,
Like now.
still. I mean, it is the power of the narrative now that we are in a constant argument with in the media.
Exactly.
It makes you hate politics completely. And it divides everybody, and it's all people trying to be silenced because they don't share the narrative of the other person.
Yeah. And I think, you say it makes you hate politics, but what I get to in the Eden Conspiracy is to show that our ancestors, including those who wrote the original Hebrew scriptures, actually wanted to give us a lens by which to understand geopolitics.
Yeah.
So that we would have an understanding of how the world works, what makes it tick, why it works that way, and then what we can do to thrive in that environment rather than be baffled by it and feel lost in it.
For some people, I have a coworker, sweet, lovely lady I work with. She is a very devout Christian. I respect her for that. But she was asking me, like, "Would you celebrate Easter recently?" And I'm like, because she knows I've talked about that. I do believe in Jesus Christ in the New Testament. I believe there's power in it. I can't tell you historically if he was real or not, but I know spiritually there is a power there. And the words are wisdom. But I said, when it comes to the Old Testament, no, that's all ancient aliens. And she kind of like, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend you. I said, but to me, Yahweh, I am a jealous God, implies a lot of things in that one statement. One, that he's a jerk. And that turned her off when I said that. I'm so sorry. I'm like, but I'm going to tell you this is how I've told it to everybody. Why I don't believe the Old Testament. Yahweh is a jerk. And if this offends people, that's my take on it. I've read it. This is my take. Yahweh is a jerk. I am a jealous God implies that he's not the only one. And you get into this in this book. And the other thing that you brought my mind to that I really never totally understood until I read, I think, your first book, Escaping from Eden. Maybe it was in there when you bring it in about Yahweh and the dragon connection, too, I'd like to get into tonight because I'm so fascinated by that. Maybe it goes back to my days as a child, my mom reading me The Hobbit and Smaug and all that, but that I want to get into some, too.
All right. That sounds like a plan.
So let's start. Let's start with Yahweh tonight, because you don't get right into it in the book, but I can see there's a lot of talk about how the Jewish people, everybody looks at him as a monotheistic worshiping Yahweh. But you point out that the older traditions really weren't. It wasn't really monotheistic, was it?
No, it wasn't. Judaism was not monotheistic in the beginning, and I show the process of change that turned Judaism into monotheism and who the key players were in making that happen. Just to complement your assessment of Yahweh earlier, for anyone who's sitting there reading from your statement, the name Yahweh is used as the holy name for God in the Hebrew scriptures. And you will find passages where if the person is talking about a cosmic vision of God or is offering worship to God, they will use the name Yahweh. But I show in the Eden series that the name Yahweh has been pasted over earlier stories of entities, stories about beings that colonized our ancestors and governed over us in the deep past. And to pick up on what you were just saying, Jason, prior to this change, we have references to Judaism as it was prior to this change. So we can go to Jeremiah, the prophet, we can go to 2 Kings, and we are told this, that the tribes of Israel worshipped other powerful ones. That's word for word from the Bible. They worshipped other powerful ones, and they disparaged Yahweh. They spoke slightingly of him and rejected his laws, and they remembered the other powerful ones with affection. Now, that's what the Bible tells us. And in the past, I would read that and read it and think, oh, how awful. And that's exactly what the narrator wants us to think.
What is that, Samuel's? No.
It's in 2 Kings and the book of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah laments the fact that the people of Israel would honor other powerful beings, advanced beings. It talks about Asherah being honored on every high hill and under every green tree and in every place the people of Israel lived. So the moment you pause and separate the narrator's opinion of this activity from his report, you realize he's just told us that Judaism was very different to what we thought. Because I was brought up to believe that Judaism meant worshipping Yahweh as God, period.
Right. Me too.
Whereas the biblical narrator has just told us, no, they worshipped other powerful beings, including and especially Asherah. And so in the Eden conspiracy, I drill down into the question of why. Why would they remember Yahweh negatively and say we're not doing business with him anymore?
I mean, he's
and
God,
why would they remember Asherah? Yeah, positively. He can't be God in that equation. And there are many moments in the Bible that reveal that the Yahweh character is not God. So that's one example. Another comes in 1 Samuel 8, when the people of Israel sack Yahweh. Yahweh has been running their society.
Yes.
That's the one. Running their society. He's been the king. He's been the ruler. And the people decide, no, we've had enough of this. We want human governance for human society.
Right.
And they get rid of Yahweh. Now,
like
if
God's
Yahweh,
not good enough, we want a person.
I know, as if
right?
a human being was an upgrade from Almighty
That's
God.
a better choice than God, right? They created everything, the universe, us, saved us. All, yeah, no.
Exactly. It makes no sense. If what you're wanting is better advantage on the battlefield or in international diplomacy, how can a human being outweigh Almighty God? It's one of those moments that clues us we're talking about something and someone else. So in 1 Samuel 8, the people come together and they essentially say, we will no longer work for you. So you have to go and we're going to appoint one of our own. Now, in that moment, the Yahweh narrative parallels the world's canon of dragon stories. It follows the exact same pattern. Dragon stories all around the world tell of a time when our ancestors were ruled over by powerful, reptilian, draconian beings who governed by force and who essentially ran human society as a slave society to keep it, the dragon, supplied with beef, lamb, gold, and virgin girls. And by the way, that's exactly what the Yahweh character wants in the stories of the Hebrew canon. And then there comes a moment when the people discover each other's power, where terror has been used so many times it has lost its purchase. And people have reached the point where they've gone beyond depression to anger, and where they say to one another, if we stand up against it, what can it do? It can only kill us. So
This reminds me of the plot of Last
you know?
Dragon Slayer, which is like one of my all-time
Yeah.
childhood favorite movies.
Classic dragon story. It can only kill us. And if we speak as one voice, we will not serve you anymore. What can the dragon do? Can't kill us all. What would be the point of that? It wouldn't have any servants. If we speak with one voice, it will know its time has come. And so many cultures speak of that moment when the humans confront the dragon, and the dragon sees its time has come and it skulks off to live in solitude in the mountains. Well, 1 Samuel 8 follows that exact same pattern. They depose Yahweh, they get rid of him, and yet the PS is a little different, because even though Yahweh's been fired from the top job, he appoints his own successor. He will produce punitive consequences if any of the future kings take their policy away from what he would want. Apparently, it's still Yahweh who wants to define foreign policy and decide who they go to war against, so on and so forth. At the moment he sees, for instance, King David count his troops, because David only wants to fight winnable wars, this is just too close to David considering his orders from Yahweh as if he had any choice. And so there's a punishment. 70,000 of David's fighting men are killed as a signal to David, you don't think for yourself. And that's the story of all the kings who follow. Yahweh remains as this shadowy, hidden hand in their political life. And our ancestors wrote that story so that we would understand about the persistence of old powers, about the relevance of hidden hands in our political life and our public economic life. They wanted us to understand what is going on around us with that information under our belt. But all that education they offer vanishes the moment you translate Yahweh as God. Because if Yahweh is God, then
That's
1
all
Samuel
right.
8, it's the end of the story. It's put up and shut up, and there'll be consequences if you fall away from God. And we miss the point of the story.
But the original, like the earliest days of the Hebrews understood it, right? As what I kind of take from it. They had this, you know, they understood what Yahweh was. They, you know, I've always wondered what dragons need with virgins and gold. But that seems to be the narrative throughout, I mean, many different cultures. And I've always wondered, you know, what connection would aliens want with that? What would they, you know, gold? Okay, yeah, that they've the Sacri-Stitchin, you know, Sumerian things that they came here to mine gold. Again, you know, and the female virgins, I don't know. They're just some wild, crazy guys. I don't know. Why would it's just why is this narrative stuck? You know, or this story, this mythology of the dragon in so many different cultures, and with Yahweh, it's just been pasted over. You know, it's God. You know, but there's so much evidence in the Bible. I mean, there's even what's the story? They go another culture. We talked about I think this last time. Another what was it? The
Babylonians
had their own.
Yeah,
dragon.
They were faking
faking the dragon. Yes, that's right.
Faking having a dragon in their tabernacle. They had to fake it because Daniel, a prince of Israel, had killed their dragon, but they kept up the pretense that they had a dragon in their tent. And the advantage of doing that was that now all those edible offerings and the virgin girls and the gold could go to the priests and the priestly families. And so that is told as a mockery of the Babylonian practice in Bel and the Dragon in the book of Daniel in the Bible. But by setting that up as a mockery, it says the converse of that is that the tribes of Israel had a real dragon. Theirs wasn't fake. It wasn't the priests eating the beef and the lamb and having use of the gold and the virgin girls. It really was Yahweh. And that's the punchline.
What if they were both fake? I'm sorry, but listen, hear me out. What if they were both fake?
Go for it.
You know, because you know they're both doing the same thing. I don't know. Yes. That's why they know theirs is fake.
Well, you could argue for that because the physical presence of Yahweh on earth becomes a little bit questionable. after he's fired in 1 Samuel 8. But certainly the story that we are told is that there was a difference between the portion set aside for the priests and the portion set aside for Yahweh. Now, it's disturbing enough that this entity, Yahweh, wants beef, lamb, gold, virgin girls. But if Yahweh is Almighty God, what would Almighty God want with edible offerings?
Right.
Or virgin girls or gold? Again, it's one of the clues. We are dealing with an entity that is physical, 3D, flesh and blood. This was an experience our ancestors had. It's recalled by cultures all around the world, and it is in the Bible. The moment we're willing to do some translation work and peel back centuries of traditional translation and get back to the root meanings of the words concerned, that's when this other information becomes visible.
Now, going back to like the story of like, you know, the witness testimony, I would say in the Bible is, you know, Ezekiel, Moses, the scene, like, you know, the descriptions, you know, this comes up in Ancient Aliens all the time, and Eric Von Daniken, and you've talked about it, but the descriptions they give of God and the pillar when it comes to Yahweh and the fire in the mountain, you know, all these scenes are very our kind of technology now. They're all,
yes,
you know,
it's very recognizable to the modern eye, isn't it?
Yeah, there's even the Egyptian stuff that almost shows like a helicopter, you know, in the glyphs. You know, I'm saying like, well, what would aliens have a helicopter? There's things like that make me question about what actually was going on in the past when it comes to the whole alien thing. Like, it would think they'd have to have like they wouldn't need rockets. You know, what you see in the Tic Tac footage, there's no rocket or propulsion there. But these descriptions, and it's not just the Bible, there's so much more. But it sounds like they were using rockets.
It sounds strangely old tech, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you get to the Pillar of Fire, I say old tech. To be fair, if you read the stories of the Pillar of Fire, which we find in the stories of Moses, here is this pillar with a cloud and fire. So immediately, it's easy for us to understand that could be describing a rocket. Now, 20 years ago, we might struggle and say rocket, but it's landing vertically. That doesn't make sense. It's a pillar, it lands vertically. Rockets don't land vertically. Well, thank you, SpaceX. Thank you, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Because now we can see in real time what a pillar with a cloud and a pillar with a fire looks like when it lands vertically, which is what we are told in the Sinai narrative with Moses. It does sound old tech. You can't do interstellar flight with rockets. And then when we have an eyewitness account of traveling inside the kavod, as it's called, gets translated as glory, but it turns out it's really a craft. We've got the eyewitness testimony of Ezekiel, and he's describing what appears to be a capsule from that cloudy pillar. And it's some kind of a drone because it's using rotors to travel, and the rotors are described, and the sound of the engine is described as it moves. So I would say, yes, it is surprising for anyone to get here. It must be interstellar travel. It must be subspace travel, but we don't have that described, or do we? Because on Earth, we've got rockets and rotor blades, but before that thing lands, the eyewitnesses say the heavens opened and a whirlwind wind brought the craft down to the surface.
Like a portal.
Okay, so the sky now has a hole in it. There's your subspace travel.
Yeah.
So they had that pinging technology that the Tic Tacs had that were filmed back in 2004, and then a whirlwind wind. Well, we might call that a wormhole. So when our ancestors use language like that, or Jacob says these beings came from space to the planet's surface, went back into space via a ladder, we know that they're using metaphor to describe something that was clearly a subspace modality. So it's all there. We might be surprised that once they're on the surface, they're using rockets and rotors, but all we can say is that is the eyewitness testimony. That's what they saw. That's what they describe.
The clouds and smoke and everything. I mean, that some of the people said the whole dragon mythology It's just really descriptions of the ship, too, because breathing fire and smoke.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's also the whole reptilian alien thing.
Yes.
It's like, where do you separate the
Well,
two?
There are moments, I think, when we are looking at technology and it's described as a dragon. And there may be moments in the Bible like that, and there certainly are in the Popol Vuh, where we have entities named, and then when it gets into the description, we think, wait a minute, that is a crashed piece of technology. Metal skin, glittering jewels, which seems to describe a dashboard, control panels, shattered windscreen. It's all there in the description. And then the thing, before it broke, would fly through the sky, trailing fire behind it so that it's brighter than the moon.
Damaged.
Well, that is a piece of technology, for sure. And there are moments in the Bible like that. But then there are others where it's clear that we're looking at something biological. Yahweh describes himself in a couple of passages by comparing himself with big beasts, big animals. And then the specifics of his appearance are described: the length of his snout, the size of his pinions, which are flight feathers. And the moment you are willing to say this is an actual description rather than some far-reaching poetry, you realize the description matches what we hear from the Mayans, who talked about feathered reptilian beings with high technology. It's there in the Bible as well. So I don't think you can write off the whole dragon narrative and say that's all about machinery. No, there were beings who have all the elements of what we remember when we use the word dragon. Go to China, again, it's feathered reptilian entities that their dragons are. And there it is, described word by word in the Bible. So I don't dismiss that. I think it's a very relevant question to ask. Is this machinery? Is this an entity? But there are certainly entities there.
So I always wondered, I mean, are we dealing with something from our... I mean, I've always said, I believe, Ancient Apocalypse I mentioned with Graham Hancock. It's a show I watched this last year. And I believe not just the civilization, I believe, 65 million years ago, dinosaurs walked this earth. We just have the fossil remains of them. But who's to say a whole reptilian race or a race of big beastly dragons didn't exist at some point? There's a lot of civilization time there that could happen in 65 million years.
For sure. And then also in the Bible, there are references to civilizations on planet Earth that may have predated even that, for which we would have no fossils, we'd have no record at all. Everything would be ground to a dust. So I think the story of planet Earth is far longer than we give it credit for. I am really excited to see the interest that Graham Hancock received with his Netflix series, and the appetite that is clearly out there for fresh explorations of human history. And Graham's research certainly points to contact with other civilizations and previous cultures. But I find in my research that there are cultures all around the world very ready to identify these civilizations as not being terrestrial. And they'll get very specific about what regions of space these previous civilizations were from.
Yeah, I'm Cherokee, and I know the Pleiadians was a big part of their, I don't want to say religious, it wasn't religious, it was their belief that they were, given, I guess, knowledge from somebody from the Pleiadians, that is their big part of their history.
Absolutely. It's there in Cherokee story. You can hear it in Aboriginal Australian story. You can hear it in Chinese mythology. And I will surprise people in the Eden conspiracy by arguing that Asherah in the Bible herself was a Pleiadian, or a representation of the Pleiadian incursion from maybe around 60,000 years ago.
Not long ago, a couple weeks ago, we had a guest on, was it War in the Hearts of Men? It was the book he wrote. It was Eli Corbally. He had taught, it was a lot about the male and female power over society in history. And I find this interesting in your book because, besides the fact that the Hebrews had not a monotheistic, they had Yahweh, they had Asherah, they had a female. It's like the male and the female, it's like the male god, the female god. But it seems like this is exactly what he was talking about. Like the male side of it took everything over.
Yes, it did. And that was part of the effect of the great edit of the Bible, the redaction of the Bible in the 6th century BCE. The process that led up to that began with a destruction of sites, of sacred sites. They were commissioned by Kings Hezekiah and King Josiah. And we're told that Hezekiah sent the Jerusalem guard into the Jerusalem temple to destroy the carvings of the Tseva Hashemayim. And the Tseva Hashemayim meant the sky armies. They wanted the knowledge of those obliterated. So the army destroyed those reliefs, destroyed the Nehushtan, which commemorated what Yahweh actually looked like. And Josiah decided that Judaism moving forwards would be the religion of Yahweh. All other entities could be forgotten. Their priesthoods would be disbanded. Their temples would be demolished. The standing stones knocked down, commemorating the places where their ancestors had met these other beings. And Asherah was defamed as nothing more than a lifeless idol. And they kept only Yahweh as their God. Now, when they did that, they amputated the whole female side of the story of paleo contact. And it was on that side that we had the stories of the nurture of human society, of beings coming from as far away as the Pleiades because they valued the human race and wanted to assist us in our great leap forward to becoming a civilization on planet Earth. That's how valuable we were. That's how positive our neighborhood is in the universe. All that gets forgotten. And now all you've got left is the violent conqueror. And that does something to our psychology as a species, because suddenly we are alone in the universe, other than us and a violent God, whom we only exist to serve. Our meaning is only as slaves for our higher being. And the idea that advanced beings would actually come and support us, that we have help in the cosmos, forget that. So instead of feeling good about ourselves and excited about human progress, we live in this flat world of service to the higher power. That's your lot. That's your level of consciousness. That's your longevity. You don't need anything more than you have because you only exist to serve Yahweh. And so there's a massive distortion of our self-esteem and self-awareness as a species that went along with this change. So controlling the narrative went a great deal further than deciding which stories you'd tell at bedtime. It was redefining how we understood ourselves as a species.
I mean, if God can be a jerk and slaughter a ton of people, so can we. That's basically went with that way. I mean, it's an easy choice for him.
You become what you worship. If your God is a violent colonizer, then you can do violent colonization in his name. If your God is xenophobic and separates human beings into my people and not my people, then you will justify racism in his name. And you can draw a straight line from the one to the other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm, like I've said, I told this really sweet woman I work with that, as a devout Christian, one of my ideas about, God and the Old Testament is that I give God much more credit than the Old Testament does. Yeah. Saying I don't believe in a God that's jealous. I don't believe in a God that's racist, that only chooses one segment of genetically people. That sounds very alien to me. I don't believe in that.
Exactly.
I like I said, I give God way more credit. The Force in Star Wars sounds much more like the kind of stuff I believe in than that.
I agree, and I think it's actually the Force in Star Wars is closer to what the Apostle Paul meant when he gave his definition of God. He was talking to a non-religious audience. They hadn't watched Star Wars, so he couldn't use that reference. So instead he told them, by God I mean the source of the cosmos and everything in it, that in which we all live and move and have our being, of which we are all offspring. And that's a far more empowering vision of what God might mean than this being that you have to placate and not offend for fear of eternal punishment.
And give lambs and gold and all this. I mean, none of that would, I mean, I get, this is what she's been taught, and others everybody for hundreds of years have been taught in Bible schools and in religion and in Judaism. I mean, all different religions now. This has touched this idea of what God is in the Old Testament. I just why do you believe that's God? Is my question.
Yeah.
Why do people buy that if they really are? And I believe she's devout. I believe a lot of people I've talked to that believe in the Old Testament as God are devout and they've read it. They see it, but why don't they see it? And they're like, why don't you see that?
I think if your friend believes in Jesus and believes that Jesus shows us what God is like, then point to the slaughters. Point to the moments where Yahweh says you can't be king anymore because you didn't kill the children. And ask how do you square that with the teachings of Jesus? And Jason, when you said that you give God more credit, you're in very good company. You're in good company among the church fathers from the beginning of Christian history who said you cannot read the Yahweh and Elohim stories as if they are revelations of God. If you did, you'd have to believe of God, this is Origen speaking, such things as we would not believe of the most savage and unjust of men. Now, he said that because he was a believer in Jesus, and the behaviors in those stories are incompatible with Jesus's teachings. And so I think if I was speaking to a Christian believer, I would start there and say, you can't take that as a God story. You know that's not godly behavior. That's nothing like the descriptions of godliness in the New Testament. So if it's not an accurate depiction of God, what is it? Who was the person who did those things? What was the being that ordered those things? Just do the maths and begin to realize those are stories about something else.
And what that something else is the curious question when it comes to the alien part of it. If this was alien or Paleo contact, what was the whole purpose? Did they create us? There's hundreds of questions that could go with that. I mean, if you read Elohim and Yahweh as aliens in the Bible, they're telling you they created us, we make them in our own image, So in a sense, there are our creator.
Well, I think if you read the story closely, what they're doing is not creating but modifying. They turned up to a populated world. I mean, the place of first contact in the Bible is Genesis 1. Where we have, and I argue this because of the correlations with other world narratives, we have a devastated planet with a few survivors on it. And then they see the powerful ones arrive who begin terraforming and then working with them and genetically enhancing them. So it's not that the powerful ones created us from scratch. They came and did genetic engineering upon those of our ancestors who were here. And that's kind of the way it's described in the Bible and in the Mayan story in the Popol Vuh as well. And it gets quite specific as to which part of the process was sort of crossbreeding and modification and tweaking, and then which part was an actual splicing of E2 DNA with Earthling DNA to produce you and me.
Yeah, I mean, if you get back to the Sumerian, and then you get to, even so many of the other cultural references to creation stories, they all kind of point to things. I mean, with Adam, it means of many, right? I mean,
Adam is, we've got a really close equivalent to the word Adam in English, and it's earthling. Earth thing.
The earth thing.
Earth thing is Adam, or humus thing, human. So that's Adam. And the story of the production of Adam is very similar to the story in the Sumerian narratives, which describes the production of some raw material from what's on Earth, and then the introduction of Anunnaki DNA. And they speak specifically about this Anunnaki by the name of Kingu, who was an ET, but he had been defeated by Enlil and Enki, who were running the show. And they reckoned a defeated Anunnaki would be ideal, because then the human being would have some higher capabilities, but would be easily dominated. and it's not a flattering story either
So they
of
gave
them
us the
or
loser.
of us.
We're taking the
They
DNA
gave
from
us
this
the
loser over here.
I know. And yet, the way the story goes on, it worked out pretty well for us because what they produced was too intelligent and too capable for them to easily manage. And that's when the stories start coming in, where they're debating over how many human beings there should be, how long should they live, what access should they have for medicine, because they were finding them hard to manage. And in the Popol Vuh, the Mayan story, they actually had to come up with a vapor to spray over human populations to dumb us down a bit so that we could be managed.
Sounds oddly familiar.
I know. Is that the 21st century we're speaking about? In Nigeria, you can hear a very similar story in which the genetic engineers introduce devices into the environment to make the humans anxious, mentally ill, and slightly sick, because then we can be managed. So the positive take home from those rather dark stories is that absent of toxins in the environment, we are actually very capable, intelligent beings, able to be far more than slaves for superiors, able to be phenomenally creative, civilization building people. And that indeed has been our story, along with the story of interference and suppression. So
It's never
that's
ended.
the cocktail. That's the cocktail.
It's never ended. I mean, what you described is still happening. In my opinion, it is. In so many different ways that they're doing to dumb us down, docile us. At the same time, also get us at each other's throats so we can't come together and wake up to what's going on around us, you know. But I mean, this just seems like the way it's been going for thousands of years. And we just keep going for it.
Exactly. Now, there's the point. Same as it ever was, which is why our ancestors wrote the stories so we could be forewarned about the means by which we're managed. So when the Gnostics talked about archons that like to feed off negative human emotion, well, we should be forewarned about algorithms that want to polarize us and make us angry and indignant all the time. Or that ethics story about devices in the environment to make us sick should forewarn us to make sure our environment is clean and our food and water is clean. These stories are not just told so that we could know how traumatizing the past was. Our ancestors wanted us to have a better experience than they did, and so they give us a lens to recognize, oh, okay, vapors in the sky, okay, toxins in the water. They are preparing us for life in the present so that we can navigate our way through it.
I'm trying to remember the name of these chips my wife is reading these ingredients to, but she works as a cafeteria lady at the school, and she keeps finding all these kids eating these really hot Tostino, like, chip things, whatever. Like, they're super hot, right? And she's reading the ingredients to me and then looking up online and telling you what they do, causing hyperactivity, anxiety, you know, like the worst things for these growing teenagers to be put in their body. All these kids are eating them, you know. And
why?
Why? We have the worst FDA, the worst FDA in America. I mean, by far, to let stuff like that get into the hands of kids.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
it's ridiculous.
It's great that we are now in a position as parents to find out what's in the food, although there are corporations trying to prevent that from happening, so you won't know what you're eating.
Yeah.
But in Europe, there are very strong laws saying the public must know what they're eating so that parents can make decisions about what their children eat. That's fabulous. But why doesn't, for instance, the federal government in the USA care about what children are eating at school? If they care about the future generation, why don't they care about that?
They did some stuff during the Obama administration, but it was just silly. It actually had no good effect at all. You know, that what they did to change the cafeterias. They were like, okay, take all the sugar out of this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, I get that. No salt on this and this. Okay, I get that. But the food you're actually giving them still is very highly processed. Now it's just highly processed and tastes worse because you didn't let it put all the stuff that's just as bad. They shouldn't have on it. But, you know, like you didn't make it. Now these kids just don't want to eat anything. Now they're starving. That's how I felt about it.
Now it's all being bioengineered.
Yes.
You can't
now they
get
can just
anything on the shelf that doesn't say it's been bioengineered.
Yeah. So what we're seeing in the debate about what school children eat is really a clash of cultures, a clash between a culture of farming that is based on petrochemicals, industrial scale farming, and the traditional organic, rotational, combination farming that has served human beings for tens of thousands of years. Those two models are clashing, and the industrial scale wants to obliterate the other.
Yes.
At a household level, we can still make those decisions. Thank goodness we can still decide we'll grow our own fruit and veg to the
Until they
extent that
ban
we
it.
can. And yeah, until the corporations ban it. And this is why we need to pay attention, because when we realize there's this clash there, which our ancestors spoke about, we need to be alert to changes in the law that would empower corporations to ban what farmers farm with and what mothers and fathers grow in their backyards to feed their children with. We are forewarned about this so that we can do our level best to get clean food and water into our children for a healthy next generation and for our own health as well. So the stories are there, not as a counsel of despair, but so that we can recognize what's going on and take whatever action we can.
I mean, controlling the food is power. Look, Yahweh gave manna to his slaves because that's what they were. You know, it's power. You know, the woman or the side, the female, the Asherah, and you get into like the Native American maize traditions of agriculture being passed on from this female entity. You can find in many lores, many culture references to gave us our own power to have agriculture. Because I've had guests on that argue that agriculture ruined humanity.
No,
get that another night, but
I am with you. That's a really good contrast because you've got Asherah teaching us how to farm, how to live off the foods that grow in the environment around us. And then you've got Yahweh saying, I'll provide this food that you don't even know what it is. And
manna,
it'll be just
right?
enough, just enough to keep you going from day to day. Manna means we don't know what it is. And you've got a perfect illustration
Soylent Green.
Yeah, perfect illustration of what the choice today, you know, the slop from the corporation in the school canteen that you don't know what it is, or the food that you grew yourself because Asherah taught your ancestors how to grow food.
I might be a bad dad, but me and my 11-year-old decided to stay up and watch a comedy horror movie the other night, and it was called Cooties. And they start out the show showing how they process and make these processed chicken nuggets. Because what happens is these kids get the zombie virus from really bad chicken nuggets. So the movie begins showing that process. And my son, I turned to him, I go, I'm like, dude, he just had food poisoning, like so bad from McDonald's. Because our friend, I'm not blaming her, she had 5-6 kids to feed or whatever. She took him to McDonald's. I get it. Not blaming her. But my poor son's the one that gets food poisoning from there. Actually, it's the norovirus, it's the bacteria, you know. But, I mean, after that, he has not eaten McDonald's since. And we're watching the chicken nugget. Yeah, right? It's solved that for him because he's a germaphobe as it is. But he's seen how they process it and make it. He goes, is that real? Is that how it's done? I go, well, they're making it look more gross probably for the movie, but it's about that gross. He's like, I'm done. I'm done with this. So like, my mom's going to love it. She's a vegetarian. It's going to totally turn a vegetarian after this movie. But the whole movie, the comedy, it's called, like I said, Cooties. It's about these teachers having to deal with kids getting a zombie virus. Only kids get it. But it really has a lot of stuff about the processed foods and the dangers of it. It's like you can tell the director kind of believes in this and is kind of sending this message out in this and all the Ritalin and drugs these kids are taking too.
Well done those writers for putting that message out there in presumably entertaining form. But it's a very serious message that says you need to be as much in control of your food supply as you can possibly be. If you can grow your own, grow your own. If you can buy local, buy local. But we need to do everything we can to combat the forces that want to hand everything over to the petrochemical industry running industrial scale farming.
I love in agriculture, the petrochemical industry is like literally nailing small farmers, local farmers for their environmental impact. They get the environmentalists to go after them, even though they're the ones creating the worst environmental impact by the way that they do their agriculture.
Well, you see, again, the public need to reject that. And I think this amounts to a dragon story. I mean, I think the corporation doing that is a dragon. And we need to find new ways of finding our together power to stand against that. I think individually we can feel completely overwhelmed, but together we have power. We have power as consumers. We have power as local voters. And we need to oppose those moves and simply
We need to wake
not
up.
do business with them. We need to defend our local farmers and realize that they are literally our lifeline. And
Yeah.
communities must not sit by while their farmers are suffering or being legally threatened. The moment these powers see human society operating in solidarity, whole communities turning up and saying, oh no, you're not doing that to our neighbor farmers.
It's hidden by the
here."
mainstream media, but that's been happening.
Yeah, but there's enough that story will get out. And I think we need to get off our backsides and do what our ancestors did in the dragon stories and confront the dragons corporately. We are atomized by being over-entertained, over-scheduled, so on and so forth. But our power is when we come together and when we do learn to speak as one voice. And I think this is something, a fresh generation has to learn.
Yeah.
Young people today don't know anything about these movements in the past. I mean, if I talk about the Ceausescu regime and how that ended, or the Marcos regime and how that ended, or apartheid and how that finished, or the Berlin
Bolshevik
Wall and how
Revolution.
that came down. These things need to be known. We need to tell those stories so that future generations will say there is power when we find each other. That message is in the Bible too, once it's correctly translated.
French Revolution, American
very
Revolution.
relevant. Of
People
course.
get together, get pissed off, and sometimes it goes really badly.
Yeah.
Bolshevik Revolution, French
Yeah.
Revolution, a lot of people die.
Well, yes, unfortunately, I mean, you mentioned the Bolshevik Revolution. In a way, that's an illustration of the persistence of old powers, because they have a revolution.
Yes, they had to
and
take
then
over. Yeah.
They're governed in exactly the same way as
Same way.
before.
Yeah. It's
But
Animal
that
Farm. but-
that warning is in the Bible too, so that we
Yeah.
can avoid repeating that mistake in the
See,
21st
I'm afraid.
century.
I've been saying this to people because on the political stuff, I am in the middle of everybody. I really don't like either side, and I'm not going to get into it. But
Good for you.
what I tell them is that they're trying to put us together against each other. We can't
Yes.
fight them if we're not united.
Yeah.
And I still have hope that we can become united under just some basic principles, just basic principles of
Well,
respecting each other, freedom to live your life. Just come under those respect. You do you, I'll do me. Come under that, like the foundation of this country. We could come under just that.
Yeah, I totally agree. We are polarized, and there's a continual attempt to polarize us along party lines. But the moment you focus on the issues in your community, you will be focusing on something that completely crosses party lines. If you are pro your town, if you are pro your clean water supply, if you are pro your local farmers, that has nothing to do with party lines.
No.
It has to do with finding a policy that supports your local community, and then you support leaders who will bring those policies in. And who cares what party they're in, as long as they bring those positive changes. I think the moment we are willing to focus on what the actual issues are, we break out of this polarizing story that we're sold by mainstream media and mainstream algorithms.
Yeah, and like I said, I hate both sides because I see them both doing it. They are as equally guilty. You call yourself Democrat,
Yes.
Republican in America, I don't care. They are both doing this just as much. And I know that makes either side of my friends that are on either side of those political spectrums not happy when I say that, but it's the truth. And they really, the hidden hand is like you called it. It's been around before this country. I believe that call me, get the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, but there is families and people that have been in control of all these things going on for thousands of years. The same bloodlines, the same people controlling it. Other conspiracy theorists have gone down the rabbit hole and connected these people to ancient aliens and all this other stuff. I don't know about that, but I do know there are powerful families that have been in control. You can follow the money, and you can find them.
Yes, you don't need to be a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist to agree with what you just said. You just need to know a little bit of history. So in Britain, for instance, we've had revolutions. We've gotten rid of the monarchy. We were a republic for a number of years. We've had democratic reforms extending the franchise first to the Lords, then to every adult male, then every adult female. We've had the Labour movement bringing people into Parliament who will make laws that benefit the 99% instead of the 1%. All these changes, and yet it's the same 5 families running the country that ran it 500 years ago. And that's argued beautifully in the book Who Runs Britain, Friends in High Places by Jeremy Paxman, who fronted the BBC's Newsnight for 25 years. And I go into this in the Eden Conspiracy. There's been an attempt at democratization in Britain for 800 years. 1215, Magna Carta, when the barons came together, spoke with one voice and told the king, this is how it's going to work moving forwards. And then in the 1600s, that's right, 1600s, abolished the office of the king. And then in the 1680s, brought the king 1660s brought the king back, but with limited powers. 1688, there's a war to limit the powers even further. All these changes, all the movements I mentioned previously, and yet today, a democratically elected prime minister cannot take up office until they have sworn fealty to the senior member of the Windsor family. Can't go more than a week in office without reporting on their political activity to the senior member of the Windsor family. Nobody can sit in Parliament as a member of Parliament until they have sworn fealty to the senior member of the Windsor family. Nothing becomes law until the senior member of the Windsor family has signed off on it. And post the demise of the late Queen Elizabeth II, we learn that hundreds of pieces of legislation were blocked by the Windsor family until they had obtained exemptions for themselves. Mm-hmm. So that tells you that the old powers really in charge have not gone away. It's just like Yahweh was sacked, but he's still calling the shots from behind closed doors. Exactly the same is true in Great Britain. And it's almost as if the story of Yahweh is there as a template, teaching the powers, just replace the king with a prime minister. They'll never know it's the same people calling the shots.
Puppet. Put the puppet up.
Or in the States, we could look at the States and say, oh, look, we've gone from a Republican president to a Democratic president. Never mind, it's the same corporations writing the policy.
Goldman Sachs backed both in the election.
It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
We got to go to commercial break. A lot more to talk about, and we'll open up the phone lines for the audience tonight. Our guest is Paul Anthony Wallis, author of the Eden Conspiracy, also Scars of Eden, Echoes of Eden, Escaping from Eden. Yes, a lot about Eden. Let's get into tonight. What is Eden? We'll talk about maybe the beginning of it all. Why are you focused on Eden as this series? I don't know if I've ever asked you that. We got into why Eden's so important to this whole series of books, the beginning, I guess. But a lot more to talk about, and your calls just when we come back from the short commercial break.
Into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Do you wish for more paranormal and spiritual content? The Paranormal Chronicles magazine is a free digital magazine crammed with the very best in paranormal and spiritual articles and features. No sign-up, no subscription, just free reading and knowledge for you. Read today at www.paranormalchronicles.com/magazine.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is the extraordinary travels of a young, alone, and broke psychic in the highly anticipated new book from internationally renowned psychic, medium, medical intuitive, and best-selling author Sherry Dillard. Critics have described I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like as an engrossing memoir, an empowering story of how a broken girl came to accept her psychic gift, a refreshing and fun read. I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is available through Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419 or by Skype caller ID OOJBland00 or JBland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guest is Paul Anthony Wallis. He's the author of his newest book, The Eden Conspiracy. Yes, we're getting a lot of paleo contact conversation tonight, ancient alien stuff. One of my favorite topics, of course. As I said, I've always been a believer. I mean, even when I was a little kid, had a feeling that when I would hear Bible stories, I just didn't feel that was God. I would always imagine it as alien. That was even before Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. But that book opened my mind to that idea way more as a reality. Paul really takes you down that rabbit hole. And Escaping from Eden, Echoes of Eden, Scars of Eden, his other books. Really, I can't highly recommend them any more than I can. They are amazing books you need to get into if you're into this subject. This new one, I think, is going to be his best. The Eden Conspiracy really talks, and he mentioned tonight, the hidden hand that has controlled the narrative for 1,000 years. They've tried to hide the real history from us. There's so much more to our past we just don't know, and a hidden element that has influenced and controlled us. And I still think, right now, is it aliens that are controlling us now behind the scenes? Draconian reptilians? Or the Windsor's reptilians? I mean, all these possibilities, I'm not willing to just throw out. There's a possibility that there are representatives for aliens in our power sectors of our world controlling things right now. I'm not saying Paul's saying that, I'm saying that. I'm just saying there is some kind of hidden hand. When you read this book and you read his others and you look at the history of it, it doesn't feel like anything's changed, has it? It does still feel like we are a bit slaves to the system that has been manipulating us for a long, long time. Tell me your thoughts about that. Do you believe that? Do you believe there's a hidden hand behind our governments in the world controlling things? You know, are we in a matrix like that of our own design? I don't know. Call in. The phone lines are now open. Join this conversation, but let's go ahead and get back to our guest. Thank you for continuing on with me here, Paul. One of the I saw Alan had a question earlier I missed about the Nephilim. You know, people have talked about that quite a bit in the Ancient Aliens lore, and the I read the David Icke books. He really gets down the rabbit hole, like the reptilian conspiracy and the Windsors. He's not a fan. But there is this idea that he got in my mind back then when he talked about blue bloods and the family lines, that they have to keep the alien gene somewhere in the family line because they're all, in some sense, being controlled by this top pyramid of alien overlords.
Yes, well, I do think there's something to that. Certainly, when you read ancestral narratives, such as I study in the Bible, for instance, you will find that our visitors are very interested in particular family lines. They are interested in particular bloodlines. When I was a little boy, I was read Grimm's fairy tales and Ladybird books of fairy tales, and I remember The Princess and the Pea. And that was a story that was really all based on the idea that royal families can only breed with other royal families. A prince has to marry a princess. A princess has to marry a prince. And that's based on how things have operated in history through the ages.
Right.
The ruling families have been very concerned to keep power within a very few number of families, which is why I mentioned before, the same 5 families run Britain today as ran it 500 years ago. And you might think, well, that's changed now, hasn't it? I mean, look at Harry and Meghan. But actually, no, Meghan has a bloodline that relates her to the royal family. Somebody might say, well, if you go far enough back, we're all related, aren't we? But in actual fact, it's a little bit more of a smoking gun than that. Mm-hmm. There's a very famous photograph of 9 heads of state. The photograph was taken in 1914, I believe. And they are independent, sovereign nations. And yet those 9 heads of state are all members of one extended family. The desire to keep these bloodlines pure has been pursued with such diligence that around about the time of Henry VIII, there were some very odd-looking kings and queens of Europe because of the problems that inbreeding throws up. So you have to know that the royal families believe this stuff and consider it very important and are definitely not wanting to dilute the blue blood. Harry makes a bit of a joke about this in his latest book, but he's very aware of that concern as well. So it's not simply conspiracy theorists who think this up. These are the beliefs and values of our royal families as well, keeping the bloodlines pure. And when you understand that alongside the fact that our ET visitors follow particular families for their own reasons, then I think it does add up to what you're saying, Jason.
Well, look at our United States presidents. If you look at the genealogy of them,
Yes.
that all leads back to the same families, except for maybe
Yes,
a
it
couple,
does.
two presidents.
That's right. With the exception of 2 presidents, every general election in the USA has resulted in the election of the candidate with the strongest blood ties to the European royal family. Well,
Yeah.
is that a coincidence? That has to mean something, doesn't it?
They have to have that right DNA, so they're inhabited by the draconians. No, sorry. I'm not
Well,
laughing
I
at
mean,
that. That could be a possibility. I'm really saying it.
And I'm
Because
sure it has to do with what they are amenable for, what they are adapted for. I think you're onto something.
that's, I mean, look, if there is something that is extra dimensional alien, let's say, that it exists not just from another planet, but in another dimension, what you would call demons, or not you, or saying people might call demons or whatever, we'd call them interdimensional reptilians or something like that. This is the David Icke stuff, but it always interests me. I won't admit it. Yeah.
Or the Gnostics would call them archons.
Or archons, yes.
And the archons were beings who were very interested in manipulating human rulers,
For
human
fear.
kings and queens. That's right. So using lower human emotion to get the outcomes they wanted through the rulers who were in place. So it could very well tie into who were the people who were amenable to that kind of interference.
I mean, they could be, indwelling inside certain people because of their genetics. Like they are able to be perfectly possessed or something by these. I mean, that's the deep, dark rabbit hole conspiracy window. I don't know. But it is scary idea. I mean, I think of like shows like V that has had a couple iterations and it gets canceled. Like wonder if it's because it's hitting too close to the truth. Or even one of my favorite John Carpenter movies is They Live.
Yes.
That is such. You know why Hollywood hated that movie. Didn't want him to do anything good with that movie because it's a total movie like knocking consumerism.
Yes.
Consume, buy, obey. And the the stuff. Wait, hold on.
I have come here to chew
I have to mention this movie.
kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
But that movie, I mean, talking about the hidden hand, like it's about interdimensional aliens or whatever that come here and like can look like us unless you have these special glasses. You can see that they're totally alien, but they're integrated themselves completely in our society, and they are completely controlling us mentally with these subliminal images and messaging. And I think John Carpenter was hitting onto something so close.
I think so.
Made a lot of people uncomfortable.
I think so. And it's there in the Bible as well. There's a moment when the prophet Micaiah remote views the Sky Council and he gets in on a conversation where they are talking about manipulating the mind of one of the kings so that he will go to war against another king. So this goes beyond going to war on the basis of false intelligence. And it's certainly a warning about that. But it gets into the state of mind of the ruler has been interfered with. So it's there in the Bible. It's there in the Gnostic stories of the archons. And again, I think that needs to equip us in how we understand what's happening in the world around us. When we see, wars that don't make sense, don't assume it's because
for a miracle.
It really does make sense if you have all the information. It may be that the people who made those decisions were manipulated. And we've had enough experience in the last couple of decades to watch that happen a couple of times over.
A couple times, about every time, my opinion.
Well, very possibly. Very
Even
possibly. When you go back to the First World War, we're almost on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The emotional intelligence behind the decisions that took us to war on those 2 occasions is very disturbing. And when you look at the cold calculations of the banks prior to World War I, you think, how do powerful people exist who have no fellow feeling towards ordinary human beings? Or when you look at the way decisions were made in the Second World War as to how we were going to bring that to an end, there was an incredible amount of mistrust, a paranoia that actually, what I'm thinking in French now, ruined, spoiled our leaders' abilities to make finessed decisions. And I get into this on my website, talking about the decisions that Churchill took that were very, very bold, but that actually meant the outcome of World War II was far worse for Britain than it needed to be. And then you've got the royals behind the scenes who were trying to foreshorten the war through other means, and it was because of their own fears, and it had to do with diluting the bloodlines once again. So you can see these agendas coming into play in real world
The royals
politics.
were also German.
Well, that was part of it. They wanted to keep power within the family, and therefore they were looking for ways of coming to a deal with Germany, not necessarily with Hitler, but with Germany to foreshorten the war so that their power wouldn't be diluted, so that the European royal family wouldn't lose power to the Americans, which is what they saw would happen if Churchill made a deal with the USA. Now, we're getting far into World War II politics here, but it's
But look what happened to Churchill right after the war. I mean,
exactly. It's
he was
relevant
ousted.
because our ancestors understood there is a non-human layer to this decision-making, and none of this decision-making makes sense until you have the bigger picture and understand, oh, this is what the ruling families do. This is their concern. This is what the non-human governors want for human society. This is why we have this kind of breakdown of communication, polarization, and even extending to flesh and blood wars, slaughtering millions of human beings who apparently are of no consequence to the people making money from the war in the process, so on and so forth. So this is nothing new. Our ancestors understood this and wrote these warnings into the Bible when it's correctly translated and into other ancestral narratives, hoping that we wouldn't repeat the mistakes and the unhappy experiences that they had.
Well, look how many times Yahweh demanded war of his people.
Yes, and total war. Not just a war, but total
genocide.
war. Genocide, that's right, where you get rid not only of the leaders, not only of the armies, but of every man, woman, child, baby, animal. And when the kings of Israel didn't want to do that, they just wanted to win a war, then Yahweh gets furious. Or worse than that, if the kings want to avoid war or foreshorten it by making an alliance, Yahweh won't have anything to do with that. And there's an incredible contrast between the way Abraham lived on planet Earth, where he would find ways of making peace treaties with all his neighbors. He only went to war once. Contrast between that and then what happens when Yahweh El Shaddai comes on the scene and starts defining foreign policy. And by the way, El Shaddai gets translated as the Almighty in many Bibles. I argue in the Eden Conspiracy, it means the powerful one, the destroyer. Now, do you really want your foreign policy set by a being that calls himself the powerful one, the destroyer? The Eden Conspiracy goes into all that.
I mean, look at the world now. You can get a Republican, you can get a Democrat in office. When they can say all these things that are different, that they're going to do compared to the other candidate. But when either one of them get in, either party, they fall right and step in line in what we're doing internationally usually.
Yeah, oh, that's very true. I mean, in Australia, we've had a recent general election, and our current Prime Minister couldn't be more different to the previous one in terms of his personality and his aspirations. So how come the policy towards the banks is exactly the same? How come our policy towards our international neighbors is exactly the same? How come the politics of war are totally unaltered? It's just a little reminder that the decisions are made behind closed doors by powers that we don't see.
The banking industry, the military-industrial complex, money, and power.
And beyond.
And beyond.
And very possibly those who introduced the money system to human society 10,000 years ago.
True. I mean, everything that we're talking about here, everything I played the Matrix clip at the beginning. I have that on the show once in a while. I play that, but I played it because my idea of this, we are in a matrix. We not saying we're in some virtual, not reality, but we are in a prison of our own design, or of somebody else's design that we've just adapted and we imprison ourselves with. But our currency, our politics, our governance, and I'm talking in broad the world, the way everything's going. The power structures that be are still doing the same thing they've been doing for thousands of years.
Yes, they are, and
we're stuck in a matrix of this. It's a false reality. We don't have to accept this.
No, we don't, and that is why the indigenous cultures who've maintained these stories we've been referencing also have curated shamanic protocols, mystical modalities, engaged to switch more of our brains on, so that we can be more conscious, more intelligent, and able to live lives that are not just about slaving for superiors, that make us more fully human.
AI is the new manna. AI is going to be the new manna. It's going to now sap the creativity out of humanity. Yes. It's going to sap all of our ability to think for ourselves.
Yes.
Away, because the AI, I can just ask the AI, it'll tell me.
Well,
or
that's
the AI
right.
will do the work for me.
We're already being trained by machines to operate machines. And it's not just physical machines. I mean, it's online systems. I mean, whenever I want to travel, a machine will train me in how to use the system that will get me a ticket and get me through the airport. Increasingly, it's machines who will look at my passport and see if it's me. A machine will tell me whether I turn left or turn right in the airport, so on and so forth. And we're getting used to being machinized by all the systems we have to integrate with just to function in society at large. I think we need to be very, very careful about that and do our best to compartmentalize that experience so that we don't turn into automatons who can't be creative, can't imagine different realities, and can't be creative in shaping a different future.
And also we're in a world, too, that is constantly arguing over your right to speak. I think right now we're in this big argument of control and power, and why things have gone so crazy in the last 10 years is because of the internet. There's the good and the bad of it. You know, there's the ugly and the addiction of it, and then there's also the good of the way people like me and you be able to do the show and talk and speak, and people to get new information they weren't gotten from the mainstream media. You know, yes. I think it's like the wheels that come off the rails a little bit with this. Like it's a tool that it could be used to control and manipulate us, but at the same time, it's a tool that it can't completely be controlled. It can go crazy and let people get information they don't want out there.
That's very true. That's what makes the internet so exciting. It is a dangerous place in terms of the potential for us being manipulated and polarized and misinformed and disinformed. But then it's a great place for real information to leak out. In the Eden conspiracy, I talk about the moment when the high priesthood of Jerusalem decided to get rid of all the other priesthoods that Judaism had. So that was all the other religious authorities. Shutting down priesthoods, shutting down temples meant they were now controlling the narrative. Well, all governments want to do that, but when you've got the internet, you can find other voices. And I think we need to get very proactive in terms of recognizing, okay, that's the mainstream answer to the question. What are the other answers? And then actually do some work to evaluate what you're hearing. What does make better sense? And when we've got radio, TV, internet, we aren't dependent in the same way that the tribes of Israel were on a single high priest telling them what was true and what was false.
Right.
We can be a little bit smarter than that.
But I can see. I just can see that if for the powers that be, if they want their power, that this is the internet, this is the enemy. That the censorship that we've been arguing about happening, if it's happening, it is happening. You know, look at what happened with the whole Twitter files and everything. That censorship is, we have no idea how bad it could get. That they're going to make it get to control.
That's very true. It's very disturbing. But as long as I can go and sit down with a person and have a face-to-face conversation, there's the potential for something else. And as long as I have the freedom to find a book that tells me something of the wisdom of a shaman from South Africa or South America, then I'm slightly outside of that realm that we just described that is so easily policed. This is why I love and value the folkloric layer of story, and why I love indigenous traditions, because there have been attempts in every century to silence those voices, and those attempts have never succeeded. And they're not going to succeed in the 21st century either. But we need to value the access that we have to one another, to indigenous voices, because that's where we are going to hear a different explanation of the world at large. That's where we're going to get our sense of perspective. And that's where we're going to get radically different information than we've received at school or on the 9 o'clock news.
Yeah, I mean, will you get any, and I don't, now news is, I mean, news back in 20, 30 years ago would be pretty straight line. You didn't have the Fox News, MSN, CNN split, you know. It was all pretty straight line, one narrative, and that was definitely probably its own controlled narrative. But now you have a divisive controlled narrative on both sides that, you know, that is meant to, you know, basically push two audiences away from each other as much as possible.
It's
in
all
opinion,
propaganda now.
right? And it's not propaganda to get everybody behind one movement. It's propaganda
No.
to get everybody make sure they don't get behind any kind of one movement. You'll be on, you know, one group on this movement, one group on this movement, and all arguing at each other while they're getting screwed from behind.
I think a piece of the puzzle is we have to help each other not be so overscheduled and overstressed that we don't have energy to think. Because I think the power of these news agencies is when people are too busy to listen to more than one news source. They will pick their favorite one and then believe what they hear there, whether it's CNN or Fox. And this happens because people just don't have the time and energy to want to think about things.
I'm one of those people sometimes. My dad was watching a lot of CNN or MSN, BBC going off about politics and all this stuff. At one point in my life, we were trying to put a sub pump in the basement. I love my dad. I just turned to him, I go, I'm trying to pay bills. I got a basement that's flooded. I'm trying to put a sub pump in. I could give a crap about any of that right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I don't care. I think that's general. Like, you have very far right, very far left, and then there's everybody else in the middle. It's just like, I'm just trying to go to work, get my job, pay my kids, get through freaking life, man. You know?
So, I mean, this comes back to the ways in which we're manipulated. If we're kept anxious, overstressed, overworked, we don't have time to question the narrative. We simply
just trying to survive.
The narrative we prefer because we're busy surviving. The moment we have time to breathe, it's a different story. I mean, I just love the image I remember of Paris when I first went to Paris. Oh, goodness me. Well, I won't say what decade, but when I was very young. And I could see men sitting outside coffee places, having a coffee with their mate, and they were discussing philosophy. They were discussing the world. They were working out 20s. What's going on because they had the time and energy and leisure. And I think the best that we can do to help each other not be overstressed, not be overscheduled, that's our best hope of thinking more creatively. But as long as we are overscheduled, that's when our thoughts are really held hostage by whichever channel we've clicked on.
Worry, anxiety, fear. I mean, and that's the other thing. The news networks now have to compete with the internet. It's not only just that they're trying to control the narrative; they have to, compete for your attention.
They do.
You know,
and so
people's attention spans are like that small now.
Exactly. So essentially, it's entertainment that's been fused with propaganda. It's what we would call tabloid journalism, to use the English phrase for it. But I really do take seriously our need to look after each other, whether we're thinking about our extended family, our neighborhood, because the powers that are always want to harass us and keep us in a place where we've only got the energy to slave. And so if there's anyone you can support and help, whether that's with food, financially, emotional support, whether you're part of an extended family and you can offer more babysitting. You have to understand the importance of offering this kind of help, because unless we're willing to find each other that way in community, we are spread so thin that all we have time to do is follow instructions, follow the herd, be a slave to those more powerful than ourselves, and that is not our best future. We have to find one another, love one another, support one another, so that we can think creatively and act more together, because that is really our hope of finding our power.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like we have to, we have to get behind something together we can all just agree on. Like just this golden rule stuff, in my opinion. Respecting, treat others as you want to be treated. Peace is every step. Just simple, small principles. You can be a Hebrew, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you can be gay, you can be a transgender, you can be a totally straight macho man. It doesn't matter.
You don't murder.
You do your
you
thing.
Don't steal.
Right. Respect me. I respect you. We can differ on a lot of different opinions, but we can come together on these few basic principles.
Yeah.
And work together for something. I'll protect your back, you watch my back. You watch what happens when you put people in a survival situation. They don't give a crap about your ideals or politics or anything. You put people in a survival situation, they're there to make sure they can help each other, because you're better to survive if you have somebody else to watch your back.
Oh, exactly. And I can think of personal stories of families that could have gone under because they couldn't pay their mortgage, but another family said, no, we can underwrite that for you until you're back on your feet. I can think of communities that have said, no, we're not letting your business go bust. We're all going to support it so you get through this period. I can think of farmers who were near suicidal because of what is happening for them, until people in the local town said, no, we are all going to get our food from you and we'll take whatever you grow. We have to support each other in practical ways.
Especially local farmers.
This is what finding our power is about. This is where we begin to learn how to have a better human experience at a societal level, instead of having all our decisions made for us by the higher-ups, visible and invisible.
I'm really concerned when you see people like Bill Gates buying up tons of farmland. And these and not just him, other corporations are doing it too. And it makes me really concerned. They're going for complete control.
Yes.
They can control our food, control our media, control everything. Especially if you have the food, you have the control.
Definitely. And also, we forget, if we think far enough back in history, if you own the land, you own the people on the land. So, you think back through European history, for instance, the farmers supported the tenants on their farms. They provided their housing, they provided their employment. But you can scale that up to royal families saying, I own the country, therefore I own the people on the land, therefore I can tax them, I can arrest them, I can execute them, I can use them in warfare, so on and so forth. But you can scale it down and realize, no, there was a more local way of belonging to one another. And so when foreign countries start buying up your land, well, you need to think about that. When individuals start owning huge swathes of your country, you need to think about that, because that really does affect human rights and the experience of people living on that owned land.
Darren, Bill Gates will be buying Ukraine next, so better believe it. He already
and
did.
It ties in with free speech, by the way. I remember visiting Coventry in the UK, and I was talking to people in a local church, and they'd been wanting to put on some kind of an event or entertainment, or whether it was just preaching on a street corner, it was something along those lines. And by British law, they were perfectly entitled to do that in a town centre, except that the town centre of Coventry is owned by a corporation, and there's no free speech on the land they own. So again, the ownership of land and free speech really go hand in hand. Another reason why we need to think carefully about land rights and ownership.
I always, I think there's some sci-fi novels and movies have covered this, but the dystopian nightmare of corporations really controlling everything. I'm a big fan of, when I was a kid, of RoboCop. You remember RoboCop? As cheesy as that movie was, not only the first one, the rest are all garbage. But what the director tried to get at that movie is these corporations like taking over, like your government, your police. There's no government anymore; it's a corporation, and greedy individuals in power and control, and you have no voting rights or say in what they do. They own the whole city, and I see that as a possible future for us, big time.
It's a possible future, and it's also our past, because when you get into the Hebrew canon and into the ancient Hebrew stories, there are moments that map out El Elyon, this character, the powerful one, more powerful than the others, doling out lands and territories and telling the Elohim, the humans on that land are yours, the humans on that land are yours. And that is not so different from anything that's happened in any of the centuries since.
I had this nightmare once of, I hope it's not pathetic, but I had this nightmare once that I was like put into this like futuristic like tech city where everybody lived in these cubiciles and everything was like very futuristic and high, but like everything was mind control. It was like a Dark Mirror nightmare. I probably watched way too many seasons of Dark Mirror, but that's what I'm afraid is going to happen. We are going to, you know, that's why I don't like cities, is that they're going to get more and more where you give up more and more your freedoms just to live and be there, and you're a prisoner there.
Yes. Well, this comes back to why I think it's helpful to remember that we've got a spectrum of company in the cosmos, and that when we're talking about the non-human layer, I mean, Hayam Ashed called it the Galactic Council. Just before Christmas 2020, he's the Brigadier General who for 27 years was the Chief of Israel's Space Security. He said there's a Galactic Council that represents multiple ET demographics with a stakeholding in Project Earth. And according to our ancestral narratives, there's a spectrum of agendas on that council.
Yeah.
And that means there are some there who are there to exploit, who want what's on the planet, couldn't care less about human beings. There are others who love humanity and are here to support us and defend us. I believe that's the case. It's the story told by the Bible, and it's the reason why I believe that future outcomes are not set in stone. You can see where the powers want to take things, but the future is not predefined. And we do have friends in high places, and I think we need to learn to do better exopolitics, to make the most of our allies, and that's at a covert government level, but I think it's also at an individual level as well, because all our ancestral narratives talk about ordinary people having access to higher beings who influence life on Earth. And I think we need to take whatever experience of that we have seriously, and take seriously the conversations we can have at that level. Because the moment we just sit back and say, oh, I wonder how this is going to play out, well, you might as well just give up and go home. The future is not set in stone, and we need to play our part in ensuring that the future's better than it might be. That means looking after one another, and it also means looking after our own state of mind and our own emotional state. Because if we allow ourselves to go into despair or into a funk, well, that's superb as far as the powers are concerned.
That's what they want.
We've been managed. So you have to stay hopeful. You have to encourage yourself, and we have to encourage one another and engage as best we can and show that we are interested. We are not a passive population that is ignorant of or ungrateful for anyone contending for us on that council. We are part of the planet. We are a force for the future, and we need to take ourselves more seriously as that rather than fall into a funk of despair.
We got a phone call here. I think this is Al in South Korea. How you doing, Al?
Hey, pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks for calling in.
Okay. Hey, Paul, I got a question for you. When did you have your aha moment? When did it, like, you were thinking about something and then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, you know, did you have that moment?
I guess what you mean, like, as a Christian, like when he decided.
Yeah, in terms of coming to
Can
this
you talk about
understanding.
it, or
Yeah, for sure, I can. There've been a couple of moments. There was a moment in 2013 where I'd been paying attention to the work of Ed Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And I joined enough dots, and I'd gone and watched Dmitry Medvedev, the previous prime minister of Russia, talking about contact at a covert government level. And the penny dropped, and I thought, oh my goodness, we're not alone.
I
And
met the.
these
Oh,
people know.
I'm sorry.
So that was one moment,
Yeah,
and I
I
remember
met
sitting down.
Ed.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, okay.
What
Yeah.
happened? Tell us about your
I
meeting.
met Ed Mitchell when I was in OTS.
Oh wow.
When I was in officer school in Texas. Yeah, I actually met him. He's very religious. He's the one that I believe his suit. He fell down. He was like doing jumps on the moon, and then he fell and he couldn't get up, and he really thought he was going to die. That's the same person we're talking about.
I'm trying to remember.
I think you're right, but you were impressed with him. It sounds like.
Yeah, he was very impressive. You could tell he had secrets. You could tell there was, like.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one actually. I got one really. Okay, when I was a captain, we had to go to Airedale in RAPCON. RAPCON is radar control. The what they call the scope dopes. So that's the slang, anyways. So I walked in there, and there was like 3 or 4 guys on the scope, and then they had their supervisor, which was on the other side. So I said, "Hey guys, I gotta ask you this. Do you ever track UFOs?" Now this is in Korea, and their eyes, all 3 of them, went to their supervisor, and then the supervisor his head like a really slow no. Yeah. So yeah, there's things out there. You're absolutely.
That's a
And it's crazy. People like 10, 20 years ago, they say, "Oh, this guy's wearing a tinfoil hat," and then it comes out that they're right. It's like that movie when Mel Gibson. Remember, he was like all paranoid, and Patrick Stewart.
Oh, conspiracy
even
theory.
Like Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was that. It exists. It exists.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I got your book. I'm gonna read it tomorrow, and I'll give you a 5-star Amazon review. How's that sound?
Oh, thank you so much. That sounds awesome. And I'll look out for you. I'll get into a conversation with you.
Okay.
That's super.
Yes, sir. I could tell by just in the camera, your eyes are blinking fast, and your clock or your brain is like overclocked. You're firing on all cylinders.
That's about right. Oh, thank you for that. I was very impressed with Ed Mitchell and came to the conclusion he really was a man of honor. You're absolutely right that I think he was saying as much as he could without actually breaching layers and layers of official secrets laws. So he was a significant part of my journey in terms of recognizing that we're in contact. And then in terms of understanding how this related to the Bible, my light bulb moment was simply when I went through an exercise of translating Elohim as the powerful ones and rereading the stories and suddenly recognizing the story that emerged. Straight away, I realized this was an extraterrestrial narrative. Straight away, I remembered this is the narrative of the ancient Sumerians. And it was that moment that meant I could never go back to the Bible and read it the old way again. So those are my 2 moments.
That brings up one question, if I may, please. Nephilims. What's your take on Nephilims? Do they walk among us, or because they exist? Wasn't Goliath?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I do believe that there are giant people on the planet today, and I believe that because of eyewitness testimony that I've been privy to. And I find it very interesting that it's a real taboo topic in the present day for some reason. In the 1800s, you could read in the newspapers, oh, there's been another find of giant bones, and they would describe the physical attributes of these giants who had been found. Now, in the 21st century, people don't want to go there.
I grew up in Minnesota. I remember they found like a giant skeleton in Wisconsin, and they tried to donate it to a museum, and then it just disappeared. And, you know, there's nothing said more about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories of that happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There was a bill passed. Wasn't
Okay,
there,
sir. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Al,
Thank
for
you.
calling in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
I've had L.A. Marzulli on here talking about like the Kandahar giant, stuff like that people
Yes.
talked about seeing, you know, that there's still. Well, I was getting at the whole idea of Nephilim, you know, that the royals are like generations and generations from the original Nephilim.
Well, yes. I mean, certainly in the Sumerian story, there is the very strong suggestion that the royal bloodlines have a bit more ET in them.
Right.
Than the others. And that comes down to the story of Gilgamesh, who had more ET in him, more sky people than everybody else, which is why he was so large, why he was so tall. And he was the crossover king between the ET kings of the deep past and then the human kings and queens who followed. And that storyline repeats in other cultures around the world. So, yes, I think there's something in that. I am just so... what's the word? Infuriated that we had the opportunity to test the historicity of that in 2003 when Jörg Fassbinder located the tomb of Gilgamesh, and we had the opportunity to DNA test whatever was there. I strongly suspect we did, which is why the story went dead. If we had tested and there was nothing extraordinary, we'd have heard the results. But because we've heard nothing in the 20
Have you even seen
years
pictures of it?
No.
No.
Of the site. We saw pictures
Yeah,
of the
no.
site at the time, and then nothing further. So logic tells me it was tested but not in public, and the results were not to be published, which means they did find something that does lend credence to the historicity of that claim, that there's a bit more ET in the royal bloodlines than in everybody else. But ultimately, we are all hybrids, and that's what the Sumerian story says. We are all a fusion of Earthling plus a bit of ET to create Homo sapiens sapiens, as we know ourselves to be.
Well, just like dragon mythology and so many things, Bigfoot and things that have crossed culture. Royals keeping royal people in the same heredity, you know, marrying cousins and doing that is throughout all the cultures. I mean, look, even Egypt, Tutankhamun. You know, if you've seen like the depiction of what he would look like, looked very sickly, because he was like totally probably inbred. I think he had to marry his mother, that's how important it was to the Egyptians.
A very odd body shape and a very odd head shape suggests there's another layer to the story of the pharaohs.
Or that
as
alien
well.
layer, right? I mean, look at
Yeah.
Akhenaten. I mean, the depictions of him with the head, the very odd head shape. Maybe it was skull binding, but I don't think so. You know, there's something different about Akhenaten. Looking, that's a whole other conversation. You know, when you get into the Egyptology and Akhenaten and his reign, small time period that he reigned, and the monotheistic change from the paleotheistic change, you know, what they were before and then after. You know, there's so much evidence of power and swings and changes between, like, it almost feels like we are there's a secret war, alien war. It's constantly been going on. For those that are trying to like help humanity and those who want to enslave humanity.
I think that's right, and that is reflected in narratives from the Vedas to the biblical narratives, the Sumerian stories. I mean, there's so much of the Sumerian story in the Bible that can be summarized in one sentence, and there was war in the heavens. There's continual conflict over how Project Earth and Project Humanity should proceed. And I think there's a bit more fractious action going on right now than in times past. I think that's why there's been more leakage in terms of disclosure. But as I said before, it gives me hope that things are not set in stone for the future. There is conflict right now as they work out how things are going to move forward. And that's the same as it ever was. You can read of those conflicts in Genesis 3, Genesis 11, Sumerian stories, the Vedas. This is the same world now as it was then.
The hand just gets more hidden. You
Yes.
know what I'm saying? It's like that's what it is. It's like we're given more and more supposed freedom from it, but really it's just tightened its control and disguised it more because we don't even know who to look. We always say they. We don't know who they is. I mean, yeah, we can look at the rich families, but who's giving them orders? You know,
Exactly.
like we don't even know who to go after. You know what I'm saying, or who to protest to, you know, or what to fight against.
Yes, I think that's right.
That's the scary part of it to me. That you know, to get people to wake up to this thing. I can't even tell them, you know, who are we totally, you know, trying to rebel against or fight against. I mean, the system's so complex and there's so much going on. Like I always said about the disclosure movement, one of the reasons we might never actually get a true disclosure is it's too complicated to just even relate to people.
Yes. Yes, I think that's right. I mean, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev was asked by a journalist how many ET civilizations are we in contact with, and he said, I don't want to give you a number because I don't want to panic people. Because if that information is out there, what does international exopolitical diplomacy look like then? If we've got far more people on that galactic council now than at the time of the Bible, how do we navigate our way through that? I think it can feel overwhelming, but again, this comes back to, I think we have to be really conscious about what emotional state we let ourselves get into, because in the absence of solid, coherent information, anxiety will often take our minds to the worst possible outcome. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that. Clearly, our information about contact and who's running the world is partial. And we have to come to terms with that and find a way of dealing with that. Otherwise, anxiety absolutely takes over and we're defeated.
Fight the enemy in front of you, basically. You know, like you said, the communities, you know, supporting your local farmers. I definitely hear that message, and I definitely think I support that 100%. We definitely have to come together as communities. We don't. I mean, I see infighting in my community I'm not going to get into, just in my local town, people fighting over the stupidest thing. Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, it's like we have to start taking control at a local level first.
Yes, I think so. I mean, when the Roman Empire collapsed in the West, I think it's very informative. The Roman Empire actually continued for another 1,000 years in the East and sort of just abandoned its Western territories. And when it did that, people had to find each other at a more local level once again. They had to find local economies, local technological answers. Local supply chains had to reestablish themselves. Local currencies had to reestablish themselves. And I think it's interesting to look at that period of history and think we might need to do similar maths as the big structures of our global world stop serving the interests of ordinary people.
Or crumble or fall apart.
Or even disintegrate. We've been here before. Let us learn from what our ancestors did and find each other again at a more local level.
We might be forced into it.
Exactly. That becomes no choice. You have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if governments fall apart, world structure falls apart, that's where it's going to come down to is you and your neighbors putting your community together and surviving.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But I hate to say it's always darkest before the dawn, but we might need that to reset things. I hate to say it.
I feel that as well. We actually have to go through some chaos before there is the public will and energy there to say, all right, what are we going to do now? How do we generate power now? How do
Yeah.
we run our local school now? How do we feed ourselves now? You might be right. We have to go through something really quite dark and painful before we get to that place where we're creating again.
I hope not. I hope not. I hope we could wake up and start moving in this direction without something like that.
I agree, and I hope that the recent health emergency, not to mention any names, has given us a little bit of a heads up that when global supply chains get interfered with, you suddenly have to think about, oh, where does my fuel come from? Where does my food come
Where's
from?
my
Where does
food
my
come
power
from?
come from? We've had a heads up. Let's be forewarned. Let's be forearmed. And we don't have to wait for a crisis before we start supporting our neighbors, our extended family, and our local businesses. Why not do it now?
The sad thing, part of that whole lockdowns and COVID thing, is it also gave corporations a lot more power, and small businesses and local small businesses were just pushed out. They couldn't survive what corporations could survive. So we've lost something in that too. It's like we gained some things, like some awakening from some people. It gave people that time, like you talked about, that solitude and time to maybe open their mind up to a little bit of this stuff. But at the same time, it also gave the corporations much more power, sadly. We got to go to our last commercial break. We'll be back. We'll continue with the phone lines. When we come back from this short commercial break, you got about a half an hour left to call in and talk to our guest, Paul Anthony Wallis, author of The Eden Conspiracy. We're talking paleo contact, ancient aliens, all that good stuff, and what's going on now. Church of what's happening now. Call in. What's your opinion? Do you think there's a hidden hand still controlling us? I do. I do. What they or them or whatever that hidden hand, be it a galactic council, aliens, reptilians, I don't know. But I think the evidence is clear that there are powerful entities that are moving us like pawns on a chessboard. We got to stop being the pawns and start waking up. That's why I do the show. I mean, I'm trying to awaken your minds up to a lot of things, and this is one of them. We'll be back from the short commercial break. Call into the show.
Intercepted a transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated.
I don't want to hear all this.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
If you are interested in discovering the truth about the paranormal and want to hear from leading researchers in the field, join Justin Brown on his 3 weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hi, I'm Barry, owner-operator of Barry's Barometer Barn. Lately, I bet you've been lying awake at night asking yourself, how many barometers do I really need? Well, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we think you need more than one. Otherwise, we're gonna go out of business. Remember, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we don't know the meaning of high-pressure sales. Come on, folks, buy another barometer. I'm trying to put my kids through college, I've got a family to support, and a secret mistress who isn't cheap.
Visit Barry's Barometer Barn, 000 Storm Drive. Come on, folks, buy a barometer. I'm Barry's older brother, Larry, and every time one of you people walk past the store without coming in, Barry beats me.
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all. but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You could accept the fact that this city is headed for a disaster of biblical proportion.
What do you mean, biblical?
What he means is Old Testament, Mr. Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave. Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419 or by Skype caller ID OOJBland00 or JBland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guest has been Paul Anthony Wallis, author of The Eden Conspiracy, The Scars of Eden, Echoes of Eden, Escaping from Eden. It's about Eden, right? The beginning. I don't know. We've been getting down a lot of rabbit holes tonight, and I've been hanging in there. I have a bad back and been a little bit under the weather tonight, but Paul is such an excellent guest. It doesn't matter how I feel. He can just carry the show because he knows so much on this topic. And his books don't disappoint at all. And like I said, I think this new one, The Eden Conspiracy, is one of his best ones so far. I'm just 100 pages in, and I already know this is one of the best ones out of those books. So definitely got to check it out. Phone lines are now open. Call into the show, join the conversation, ask a question of our guests. We only got a little bit of time left, so let's go ahead and get right back into it. Thanks for hanging in there with me, Paul. Like I said earlier, why did you focus on, like, you have the Eden series of books? Why Eden? Is it because it's the beginning?
Yes, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word Eden, know that I'm talking about human origins, the stories of beginnings. And the title, Escaping from Eden, was obviously wanting to catch people by surprise. Why would you want to escape from Eden? Eden's
Right.
a paradise, isn't it? And so it immediately suggests there's another story here. Eden was not what we think it was. And so we go into escaping from Eden and discover, oh, this is a story of genetic modification. This is a story of paleo contact. And we go from there. And so I've kept that as the theme, the scars of Eden. Again, there's that same dissonance. Eden is paradise. How can we have scars from our experience in Eden? And that's exactly what that book is about. Echoes of Eden. Again, Eden is the beginnings. And so these are beginning stories that have never gone away. The echoes of Eden are the stories that always survive, always resurface. But why would they have to echo? Why would they have to resurface? And that's a story of suppression of indigenous narratives and indigenous information. So all that runs along. And then the Eden conspiracy. Again, there's a positive word, Eden, and conspiracy. Oh, something bad has happened here. The narrative has been changed. Something has been hidden from us. What is it? And you go into the book and you discover that the Bible is about more than paleo contact. Not only is it not the book about God you thought it was, but it's not just a book about paleo contact either. That there is a rich education offered by our ancestors, which we now need to recover because of the conspiracy that's hidden it through the centuries. So that's the theme. And I did my next book. Well, I have a different title up my sleeve for the next one, but I'll say a little more when we get closer to the time.
Okay. All right. You let me know, because I'll definitely have you on for it.
All right.
But I think, with I've had archaeologist Heather Lynn on before, and she's talked about her experience with private collectors of ancient Babylonian and Mesopotamian artifacts, and that these rich and powerful people are very obsessed with it.
Oh, yes, not just rich and powerful people, but nations as well. I mean, the story of the 2003 incursion into Iraq is a story of archaeology as well as other things. And I've been in contact with, I'll just say plenty of people with privileged information about the archaeological aspect of that mission, that we were retrieving items that were then taken out of the country to the USA, possibly to Israel, because, well, put it this way, if any of the stories about ancient tech in that part of the world, such as are told by the Sumerian cuneiforms or by the Bible, if any of those are true, then clearly you want your hands on that information and those artifacts if you want to be the leading power on the planet. And this is an aspect of our experience in that incursion. So I just use that as one, for instance. Or if you look at the names of craft chosen by NASA, why is NASA interested in the classics, in ancient stories of paleo contact or gods? What's all that about? People have been very interested to see some of the declassified files from intelligence agencies in the last few years to discover, our intelligence agencies are interested in deep history.
Yeah.
They're interested in stories of paleo contact. They're interested in stories of human origins. Why is that? Why is the probe that the European Space Agency sent up to test the theory of panspermia called the Rosetta probe, which is about decoding ancient wisdom on planet Earth? These are all white rabbits who are very worthy of our attention. Authorities, national authorities, military agencies are interested in archaeology and ancient stories. Why is that?
I mean, according to Bob Lazar, who supposedly worked on Area 51, he was given a briefing on on ancient history and alien contact. Like they knew it all. Like in the briefing, they've been here this whole time.
Yes.
And you've heard this from other insiders that they've done this.
Absolutely. I mean, in the 1960s, NASA was listening to Carl Sagan telling them they needed to look into the Sumerian stories. And if you want to look into them, not only do you have to read their literature, but you have to physically be in that part of the world to dig the artifacts up. So that's an interesting connection I make as well.
Yeah, there's so much evidence, in my opinion, of paleo contact and evidence they've been here, but they've never left, that governments can't just ignore it. You know, they know the possibility there could be a portal or craft or technology they could get their hands on. They're going to go for it. I mean, the other night, me and my son were looking for movies to watch. We ended up on that Cooties one. One of the movies we ran across, and goes, "What's that?" I go, "That's Stargate. We should totally watch it." He's like, "Oh, not an opinion." I'm like, they find this, the government finds this total Stargate and goes to the other world. Yeah.
Well, that is very relevant to our earlier conversation about Iraq, because I've heard from plenty of veterans of that war who've contacted me, and they said, what is the credibility of there being a Stargate or portal technology in Iraq? And I have to tell them I don't have any privileged information, but what I can tell you is this, that NASA has been studying portals for more than 30 years, that 30 years ago they were asking the question, can we fly a craft into a wormhole, a portal that we've identified? They were already measuring the massive material that traveled through it. So there's real science around it. And if you wanted to find a place on Earth where you might find one, if you were looking through the trove of ancient narratives, Iraq is where you'll go, because that is the place identified by the Bible and the Sumerian cuneiforms, the ancient Stargate at Babel. So I haven't had eyes on. Your friends say they have. I'm perfectly prepared to believe that, because there's the credibility in our ancient narratives and in contemporary science.
You know, I remember seeing Stargate in the theaters and thinking to myself, I was a kid, but thinking to myself, this could totally be real. This could have totally happened. Like, we could have totally found the Stargate. So, if it exists, because at that point I was already sold on the ancient aliens thing. I was like, if this could exist, my son just thought it was like a wacky idea. I'm like, come on, man, they find a Stargate. He's like, it'd be so old, it wouldn't work. I'm like, who knows?
There is so much
the technology would be there.
Yeah, there's so much information, actual information secreted in fiction, whether you're looking at Stargate or Star Trek or Star Wars or The Jungle Book or Tarzan. Writers often channel information knowingly. Sometimes they do it without knowing that's what they're doing. And sometimes they have access to privileged information. And I do believe that that is the case behind Star Wars, Stargate, Star Trek. I mean, there's an amazing little smoking gun evidence in the Star Wars canon, which is the Death Star, which is the spitting image.
Yeah, my favorite.
Yeah, of Mimas and Iapetus. No human eye apparently had seen Iapetus prior to, when was that? 1990 or something like that. And yet, 1977, in Star Wars, here's the Death Star, which is Mimas de-aged by several thousand years. So how on earth did Star Wars, George Lucas, have that image? How did he have that information? Well, it's privileged information, and it's very possible it had come from
a galaxy far, far away,
non-terrestrial source, because we hadn't filmed it. That's right, by that point. So once you see something like that, once you add up all the technology in Star Trek that has actually been created since the series, and it's not because people watched the series and thought that's a good idea. They were ahead of the curve. They knew what the experiments were. There was information in the Twilight Zone, and what was the other one like the Twilight Zone?
Outer Limits.
Came from Outer Limits, that's right, where the writers had contact to esoteric groups and privileged information out of US military intelligence. So never assume that fiction is great fiction because it was just a great writer. Themes recur. The Stargate idea recurs for a reason. The idea that our ancestors were visited and adapted recurs for a reason. The idea that primitive humans might be worked with to introduce them to sophisticated modern society, that story recurs for a reason. And the reason is because it's a memory of something real.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars, in a sense, I mean, George Lucas could have been unknowingly tapping into like ancient galactic history. Maybe it's real somewhere out there, a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. I can only dream. That means I'm right in believing in the Force. But I always say that these guys have had something tapped in. Steven Spielberg, especially.
Yes.
When you get into, like I said, the Taken series, I'm a big fan of that. And most people don't know about. Most people don't know about that series. A huge fan of that. And then Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was definitely tapping into. It has some information, in my opinion. And he's recently spoken out more about it too.
Yes, he's getting a little bit more open about what he knows or what he believes. And I think it's really fun that in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you've got Jacques Vallée. You've got an actor playing Jacques Vallée. So you know that some real research has gone into the production of this movie about real information found by real credible researchers like Jacques Vallée before ever we're watching the movie on the screen. So it's information. It may be channeled information, but it's researched information as well.
Well, they're saying those are the theory that the whole at the end of Close Encounters. Spoiler, sorry, haven't seen it. But at the end of Close Encounters, when they do the whole music and the big ship coming down, that was based off of a real event, of real contact.
Yes. I don't have any privileged information about
neither,
that, but I wouldn't find that hard to believe based on some of the things that Steven Spielberg is already saying. I'm just looking forward to what he has to say when he's really, really old and thinks he's got nothing to lose, and he could spill the beans on what information that he actually
he said he thinks it's a good possibility they could be visitors from the future, which I found interesting that he made those comments recently. I'm like, really? Because I mean, that's part of the theory I've had too. I mean, some of it could be that. I mean, there's the possibility of parallel future versions of us coming back and messing with things. I don't know, but I just found it interesting. Spielberg went down that route. I didn't expect that from him.
No,
I'm like thinking. Then I started wanted to rewatch Taken. I'm like, does he make hints to that in Taken? Or even Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Maybe he does.
Indeed. If the beautiful, helpful people from the Pleiades is us from the future, then that's a nice story. But if the violent, conquering ones are us from the future, I'd be less into that.
But maybe they're both, if you believe in the parallel universe and possible future theory.
That's true. But, even without that aspect of time travel, ultimately, all life in the cosmos is related. If you hold to the theory of panspermia, which I do, then all life in the cosmos is really the result of the same genetic coding. So we're all ultimately related. We're a part of each other's stories.
We're all distant cousins.
All distant cousins, yeah.
It make sense for them when they came here and they found a species that had some genetic connection to them to alter it. Another one good one it covers that is Prometheus. If you ever seen that.
Oh, for sure. And look at how much ancient narrative went into constructing that movie.
Yeah.
It's not just that the themes are recurring. There's some really interesting details. The fusion of E.T. blood with life on Earth. That's the Sumerian story that you're looking at there.
Yeah.
I was watching another movie the other day with my kids. What was it called? The Eternals.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Very deliberate repeating of Plato in that book. Plato's story of cosmic origins is told really beautifully and precisely in the Eternals. That's the Marvel Universe to anyone who hasn't seen the movie. And I find it incredible. In these kids' action movies is carefully researched ancestral narrative. And I was watching it with my kids and I kept pausing it and saying, that's in my book. That's in my book. I had to leave the room in the end. I had to leave the room because they just wanted to watch. But I was happy they were watching.
Yeah. Well, I get it. I mean, my kids would probably recognize it because they've sat and watched so much Ancient Aliens with us. They'd be like, hey. But that's the thing. But why is Disney deciding that we want to make sure that gets into kids' area? Are they kind of conditioning our younger generations to accept maybe a new philosophy about the universe?
I think it's to do with the writers. I think the writers are actually passionate about getting this information
Yeah,
out.
somebody is.
I don't read it in a negative light at all.
No, I'm
I
not
think
saying
they're
negative.
doing what storytellers have always done,
Mm-hmm.
where they find the great stories and then they find ways of retelling them. And I think they really are, in the Marvel Universe, very interested in getting Plato and the Sumerian stories out, so that in the future, when my kids are reading Plato or a translation of the Sumerian cuneiforms, they'll say, "Oh, I recognize this. This is ringing bells."
I mean, you can think about it too in all the superhero movies and stuff. I mean,
Oh,
DC
yes.
and Marvel, how much they
For
are
sure.
depictions of like the Greek gods, and I mean, Superman is an alien. I mean, you know, how much of that's our imaginations and our creativity sometimes reveals the truth of our past. You know, I think, you know,
It does.
we retell it in some way. It's built into our subconscious.
Also, I mean, the idea of activation of higher abilities. We
Yeah.
all feel somehow that should be true, and so we like the superhero stories. But when we look at the story of, I can't remember his name, Electroman or whatever he's called, activated by a massive electric shock. Well, I'm connected with two people who were activated by being struck by lightning.
And I've heard
And
these
since
stories.
that
Yeah.
time, they've had higher cognitive abilities, which their friends love to put to use because they are so real and so reliable in terms of remote viewing, future viewing, insight, mind reading, health reading. These were abilities my friends did not have before they were struck by lightning. Now they do have them. Sounds like
There's a
something
lady.
from the Marvel
I mean,
universe, but
she's
it's
deceased
real
now.
life.
But there was a famous psychic. I think she was in Illinois. I mean, she's deceased many years ago. Who she was very famous for her accuracy and knowing things, and she was struck by lightning.
Yep.
You know, it's happened. You know, don't recommend. Don't go out there and stand out with a pole and get
No.
struck. You're not going to have superpowers. Don't do it, people.
No.
But they were chosen for some reason. I mean, in Native American lore, there are some Native Americans that believe that you can be, like, I don't want to say struck by lightning, but like basically picked up by like the thunder gods, or I don't remember what it was, but that had something to do with
yes.
lightning. It would change you and give you this ability to be like a shaman or seer or something.
Definitely. Well, in Echoes of Eden, I tell the story of a guy in Brazil who had this experience, and he was struck by lightning 30 years ago, and all the time since he's had these heightened abilities. And I'm also connected through my family to somebody else who had the same experience.
Really?
And because he was living in a very Christian environment, he presented what he was doing in Christian language. He had a prophetic ministry, but always neglected to mention that actually this was switched on by being struck by lightning twice.
Twice?
In
It's
one
like the guy in Caddyshack.
thunderstorm. Yeah.
Was it a Caddyshack?
So
Yeah.
I know it's real stuff. I know it's not just in the superhero movies, and it's something that relates to potential that we can all access, not necessarily by being struck by lightning, but very
don't do
often
that.
through using a more protocols like controlled conscious breathing is a way you can heighten your abilities in this way. A lot of people use that. Some people are into psychoaffective teas. Other people into diet modification, lots of people very into earthing and sunning, and it all relates to maximizing the health of our brains and our ability to switch on latent abilities.
Well, I'll tell you what, for me, my wife's really gotten serious about what we're eating and like trying to like start our garden last year, and like
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, because and I'm all behind it, and I know I used to eat really bad. I've gotten way better in the last couple of years. One thing COVID did for me was get me way better about my diet and taking vitamins and taking better care of myself.
Well, you are looking very good, I should say, Jason. So it's
I'll turn
obviously
44
working.
next month.
I know, that's amazing. You don't look anything like that.
Well, thank you. I hope it stays that way. I credit it to not really drinking alcohol. Because all my friends that drink, they all got bellies and look way older. I'm like, see, I don't drink. I think that's what it is. But
I'll have to think about that then.
But I've had guests on here, more than several guests, that just pound away on the fact that like all this stuff you're consuming, you know, and doing to your body, and I'm guilty as everybody else is still consuming it, it's blocking your energies, it's cutting you off, it's dumbing you down, and I can't disagree with them. And I worry about my kids. My wife's really getting, being a parent changes everything. It's like you don't want your kids to be affected by this over-processed crap that's all out there for them to eat. Like I told you about the teenagers she watches eat this stuff, and she tells me the ingredients on it. It's like, dear God, you might as well be eating paint thinner.
Well, look, it's really relevant today in terms of taking control of our food supply. But just to sort of take the pressure off a bit, all through the ages, whenever people have done shamanic ceremonies that are tea ceremonies, they have to cleanse the person's diet first. So even if you're an indigenous person living out in the bush, out in nature, the shaman will still say, we're going to have to change your diet for a week before we do this. So, it's all on a spectrum. And if people living out in the wilderness have to clean up their diet, I guess how much more do we living in such an urbanized environment?
Especially in America. Especially in America, the crap they put in our food. And now, they threaten about the food shortages. And, a factory had 18,000 cattle go up in a ball of flames just recently, there's all these food processing plants getting stuff just weirdly happening. It seems the food supply chain still. And so it's getting more people like my wife and her sister-in-law, or my sister-in-law, her sister, she's been doing her own garden, more people interested in that. So it's doing some good things. It's getting people to, at least some
definitely
to go out, I need to get my own food or grow my own food.
For sure. I remember my grandparents who got through the years of the Depression because they were part of a little cluster of houses, about 16 houses. They all had long strip gardens. They all grew food. One family kept goats, one family kept chickens, and they simply pooled what they had. And across their backyards, they were able to produce enough food that meant that they didn't have to use a lot of money in order to feed themselves because they grew such a balanced diet when they pooled what they all
and they
had
preserved
together.
and canned it. My grandparents did that.
Yes, they did, and they pickled it. They fermented it so that they could keep it without power, without refrigeration. And I think we need to return to that kind of approach, those kind of skills. Whether there's a crisis that requires it or not, it's a healthy way to live and to relate to each other.
If you start looking into the stuff they're putting into processed foods and what you're consuming, you don't need to wait for a crisis. You're gonna, if you really get down that rabbit hole, you're gonna be like, I don't want to eat that stuff anymore.
And the differences between what they give us out here compared to the UK and Australia, if you look at the back of a Heinz ketchup bottle,
packaging even
the same exact packaging, but ours is loaded with sugars and preservatives, all sorts of extra stuff that they don't put in the UK's or Australia's.
Yes.
Yeah. We have a problem in America with seed oil, sugar, and what would be the other thing I think is a major
corn oil.
Corn
oil. Yeah. That's our biggest problem in this country. We're oversaturated with it. Like I don't think we need to ban stuff like they were like in New York back in the day. We're like, we're gonna ban trans fats. We just need an FDA that actually is working for us. Is actually putting the right information out about what a balanced diet is and what, and also maybe banning stuff, saying, maybe we shouldn't have these chips that have stuff in it that gives you anxiety, hypertension, and depression and all these other horrible things, especially to adolescent kids.
Some people want to ban rice right now. The climate people are saying they want to ban rice. I think New York wants to start banning meat.
Yeah, I'm not for that. I'm not for banning meats and stuff. I think things are in moderation. I'm not, I don't think it's a good idea for us to start eating genetically grown meat either yet until we know the total ramifications. That really worries me, and that's where it's going. And you have either genetically grown meat is our option they keep now talking about, or bug meat. Neither one settles for me. Maybe I will go vegetarian, but if that's the case, by force, I guess, because I'm not eating that crap.
It's amazing how all these things relate, because if you go to shamanic healers, they will talk about changing your diet not just for your health, But if you want to be more in tune with the cosmic help that's available to us, if you want to be more in tune to getting those synchronicities working for you, getting that guidance that you need, they will talk about modifying your diet. And that can be found embedded in Judaism and Christianity as well, with the idea of the fast. Time and again in the Bible, when a person fasts, it is followed by a contact experience of a positive kind. And so that's why in a conversation about paleo contact, we're talking about food as well. These things are all interrelated.
If we can open ourselves up through like basically cleansing ourselves, get rid of the highest vibration, we can contact something. That's the one thing I think people all think about, and we're almost at the end of the show here, but I've said this several times on the show, is that when you think about aliens and them out there, we think about spaceships and teleportation and technological advances they have over us and can communicate with us, but we forget about the part is if they're technologically advanced thousands of years ahead of us, they could be spiritually advanced and be able to do the things you see in Star Wars that the Jedi can do, and biolocate and communicate from vast distances with the mind and use the Force.
Well, a little spin on that. I believe that one of the reasons, and I believe this because of listening to ancestral narratives, one of the reasons some of our neighbors are so interested in us is because if they can have more of what's in our gene pool, they will get better at those things, because innately we have a phenomenal capacity for spiritual connection, imaginative connection, all those things you just mentioned. We just need to learn how to operate it.
And maybe that's why besides the interestedness is also the fear of us achieving that.
Fear of our potential, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
The need to suppress us and manage us. Because, yes, without that interference, our potential is sky high.
Well, Paul, it's been excellent having you on the show. Let me know when the next book comes out, because I got to get you on. I got to forget, in case I don't want to lose you, I want to tell you my friend Josh Turner from the Paranormal Roundtable wanted to tell you he needs to talk to you. So,
all right, I will look forward to that conversation. And when you finish the Eden Conspiracy, we might have another conversation.
Okay, yeah, I definitely will. Definitely will. Well, thank you, Paul. You've been excellent, guys. That's it for the show. Next Sunday, we will have Phil Webster on. We're going to be talking about his book, Letting Glow, A Guide to Intuition, Spirituality, and Living Consciously, kind of where we ended the show talking about. So we'll continue on next Sunday, how we can live more consciously and spiritually. We need more of that in this world. All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Everybody who shares out the show. Keep telling people about Paranormal Soup, an open place, open forum for us to speak about our experiences and share without no judgments. And we can listen and learn new things and hear other ideas. That's what we do here. And we talk about the weirdness that is this life. Every Sunday night, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Time. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Keep telling your friends. And don't forget you can donate $2, $5 a month on Patreon. It does help pay the bills. You can always donate on Super Chat on YouTube. And I think Facebook has a star thing you can donate on. But best thing's Patreon if you want to help out the show. It does help pay the bills. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next Sunday. Have a great night.